full of scum right here on a spinning blue ball. A spark from the sky made the scum come alive. Somehow it managed to thrive. Then the scum grew fins and learned how to swim and swam upon the shore. From one to the next, species progressed. From that day on evermore. And not far in the past, from some monkey's ashes, how we find us here. The theory stinks, found no missing links. It's clear that none will appear. We're on a spinning blue ball. That's a lie they've been telling us all. Don't believe the things they say. Use your mind, find your own way. All the powers that be will show you what they want you to see.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Flat Earth Podcast. I'm your co-host, Curious Jay, alongside me, Dave, from deep inside the rabbit hole. Thanks for joining us once again for another hour or so of Flat Earth audio. Dave, what's going on this week? How are you? Which Dave do we have this week?
I am doing fantastic right now. I can't guarantee what's going to happen later because we have a guest coming on who is the son of an astronaut.
Son of an astronaut. And we're not kidding about that, folks. It's not a joke. There's no punchline. Will be joining us later on in the show. M. Scott Veach, who left us a speak pipe last week, who left us a great speak pipe from the globe side of things. And we reached out. We found out he was the son of an astronaut. Dave did, and he reached out to him, and he agreed to come on the show. So we're going to have him on a little bit later. So right now, Dave's in a pleasant mood. No promises for later on, during or after the interview.
He reminds me a little bit of like flat Earth math. Charles, you know who that is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's like super nice and really comes off like he believes everything. I don't know whether this guy actually believes it or he is a total shill. We don't know, but we'll find out, I guess, when we
talk to the man himself, and,
sure.
and we'll just ask him straight up. But speaking of NASA, this just in, the NASA Curiosity rover unearths the building blocks in 3 billion year old organic matter on Mars. They have found the building blocks of life on Mars, Dave.
So this, how many years old is the rover? Is it 15 years ago it landed there?
Yeah, something like that.
So this thing with a couple of solar panels that somehow stay clean is still operating. It's able to drill into rocks and it's finding organic life.
Yeah.
That's just to make us believe that one day we can inhabit Mars.
Yeah, no.
What do you
This
think?
is just fuel for the fodder. I mean, this is just it's exactly like, a lot of people have done those videos that really show how they were priming the pump. They were getting the people ready back in the day, in the 15 or 20 years prior to the moon missions.
Yep.
One thing after another, the moon, books, fiction, science fiction, all that stuff. Well, now what they're doing is, they're laying the groundwork for the mission to Mars.
It's got to be on all the covers of all the main magazines in the next coming days, just to thoroughly brainwash the world into believing in heliocentrism, which is the biggest secret they must keep to keep control.
Yeah, without a doubt. So you brought up something before we started the program, before we started recording, and you said, I'll explain once we're recording. Well, tell me what you were going to tell me about the Curie point, to follow up what we talked about it last week.
Oh, yeah. The Curie point, we were talking about how metals have a Curie point where they lose magnetism.
Yes.
And a couple of listeners to the podcast had left comments and said that the reason that it doesn't matter how hot the Earth's center is, because when they discovered the magnetic field around the Earth, they didn't know about the Curie point, so they're grandfathered. Just like the astronauts that went to the moon didn't have to worry about the Van Allen radiation belts because they didn't know about them then, so they're grandfathered.
Okay, so if you don't know about it, no problem.
Right, it's grandfathered. It's like they changed the rules, but if it happened before that rule was changed, you're grandfathered. Period.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a handicap ramp on your house or your business if it was built before 1984, I think it is.
Right. So there must not have been any handicapped people.
God, did I hear
Because they didn't
crickets after I laid that out?
No, I mean, I'm just saying by that logic, you know what I mean? Like, that's insane. Yeah, just because they didn't know about the Curie point, they didn't have to go by the rules of it.
There you go.
There we go. Unbelievable. For those of you who missed last week's episode, check it out because that was my my challenge to science of the week. How is it that the molten core of the Earth, which they say is molten iron in the center of the Earth, that gives us our magnetic poles around the Earth, it produces our magnetic field. How is it that iron has a Curie point? 1/5 of the temperature that they say the molten core is. And the Curie point, folks, in case you missed last week, is the temperature at which a magnetic metal loses its magnetism. All right, next topic we need to talk about, Dave. Let's talk about the ISS for a second. Jaron did a great video talking about how it transited the moon. And then we wanted to talk about the assembly of the ISS.
If you look at the ISS, it's this 100-yard long, very awkwardly built structure. And you would have to test it out. Any machine that's built on Earth that goes under stress, they stress test it. You would think that they would build it here on Earth and test it. That doesn't seem to be the case. There's no pictures or video of it being fully assembled here on Earth. So we're led to believe that they built it in space, traveling at 10 times the speed of a bullet for the first time ever, and it worked perfectly.
Right.
The astronauts that built it in their spacesuits, so they have these gloves on and the pressurized suits, they're able to build that thing without mission control seeing it because there's zero pictures or video of it being built.
Wow. Yeah. Did you see speaking of pictures and video, did you catch the Shoemaker-Levy comet stuff?
Yeah, that was the Shoemaker-Levy comet. For those of you that don't know, was years ago a comet was going to hit Jupiter so we could see it, and it was a big thing. The video was like a Nintendo. It was like, remember Pong?
Yes, of course.
The graphics were worse than Pong, and people used that as proof. Somebody in on one of the comments on our videos was saying, well, space is real, and here's proof. And they showed me a picture of a rover on Venus. Did you know that we have a rover on Venus?
What?
Yeah, a picture of a lander, maybe it's not a rover, where you can see this little hunk of metal in front of the camera, and then it looked like the bottom of a badly burnt frying pan, and then a yellow horizon line with a yellow sky. And they're like, that's Venus. That's proof that space travel is real.
Is that? Are you being serious? We have something on Venus?
Well, I think we landed a probe on Venus years ago, supposedly. And that was a picture of it landed. I don't know if it's like the Mars sand buggy or whatever it's called.
Wow. I wasn't even aware of that. Huh. So, yeah, according to coolcosmos.edu, has a spacecraft ever landed on Venus? The answer is yes. Several landers from the former Soviet Union have landed on Venus. They were able to send us information for a short time because they were only able to send us information for a short time because the extremely high temperature and pressure on the surface of Venus melted and crushed the landers. This was back in December of 1970.
Yep, that's about right.
A craft called Venera 7, sounds like an STD, became the first spacecraft to land on another planet. It measured the temperature of the atmosphere on Venus in 1972. Venera 8 gathered atmospheric and surface data for 50 minutes after landing. Venera 9 was in 75, and it gave the first ever close-up photograph of the planet's surface. 3 days later, Venera 10 lands, takes photographs, studies the rocks. In 1978, Venera 11 and 12. So wait a minute, let me get this straight. So far, that's 5. 5 craft have landed. 5 Veneras have landed on Venus. Venera 12 sent back data for 110 minutes before the effects of the heat and the pressure ended the mission. In March of 82, 2 more Soviet spacecraft landed on Venus. Venera 13 and 14. My gosh. So yeah, we've landed on Venus.
And that's what's going to happen to Earth if we're not careful with our carbon emissions.
Right.
We're going to have the Venus effect, they call it. Hey, speaking of the Soviets, the Soyuz launched again the other day with 3 astronauts in it. Did you get a look at that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I checked out the video you posted on that, and in fact, I showed my wife the wonderful clip, the segment where you show all the cell phones and the cameras.
There's a couple things that they always do. The globe trolls, NASA fanboys say, "What about the thousands of people that saw it and all of the private, all of the amateur videos?" They always show people watching, show people filming. They always have a bird fly across the screen
Yeah,
just before it takes off. Always, always. Go back
Yep,
to any
always
of the
a bird.
launches. It's always a bird. Sometimes they have helicopters in there. It's complete fakery. Now, do they launch something that some people see from a distance? I think so. But the video that I found was somebody filming, and they made sure they filmed the crowd. Then they showed the rocket, bird flies across and everything. But what I noticed in all of the people holding up their phones, the phones were blank. They were black. So they were, and I had seen that once before on a Hillary campaign.
Oh yeah, the press conference or whatever. Yeah.
Where you could see the screens, but Hillary wasn't on any of them.
Right.
Which showed that she wasn't really there. I found, there was a dozen phones I zoomed in on, blank screens. So those people that we saw in that video, and then all of the videos I found online, they're supposedly from different people, but when it comes time for the launch, it's the exact same footage.
Right. So none of those cell phones, you can't find any of the footage that came from the crowd.
No, because they forgot to turn their phones on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. You've got to check this video out because when I was showing my wife, she said, well, people just say, well, the glare kept you from seeing it. I'm like, but keep watching. I'm like, these are different. The camera angle is different for all these phones because every time you pan over and look at a different phone, it's a different angle. So the angles are all different, which decreases the chance of it just being a glare issue. But then I'm like, look, this segment of this guy is standing in the sun. This guy is standing in the shade. If you lined up 30 people in my driveway and said, okay, everybody point your phone up at the thing and film. There is no way, and I filmed those 30 people, there is no way that we could take that footage back, and go back and look at it, and everyone's phone would show black. There's no way that would happen.
There's no way. The phones are brighter than the people's clothing and, their necks and the backs of their heads, which we can see perfectly. The phone that's right next to someone's head is brighter. You would see it. And also, some of the people were filming the backs of other people's heads. They weren't even holding their phones up high enough.
Yeah, it reeks of a crowd of extras that were just told to, okay, act like you're filming, lift up your phone, blah, blah, blah. Keep them off, though. Keep them off.
I wonder if they're actually even real people at this point. They could completely be, CGI people. They can do amazing things, and I truly think they're there.
What's the name of that robot lady?
Sophia?
Sophia. There were a bunch of Sophias, a bunch of AI.
No, those are actual. That's an actual robot. I think these could just be computer animated
computer-generated
people.
I got you. I think you insinuated CGP. I think you insinuated in the video that they could possibly be standing in front of a green screen.
That's for sure.
Which would explain why they were told to keep their phones off.
Of course. And then also, if you look at the rocket, whether there was a real rocket in front of them or not, whatever it was is small and close, and you're supposed to believe it's far in the distance. It's just a miniature. Whatever they filmed or however they put that footage together, they didn't do it in full scale. They did it in miniature scale. And it's obvious if you just have the eyes to see and the mind to think.
Yeah. Speaking of a mind to think, if no one else is out there familiar with one of the biggest debunkers out there, his name is Mick West. He runs the Metabunk site.
Oh, yeah.
He has been, I guess, a thorn in the side, some call him shill, whatever you want to call him.
If anyone is a shill, he is the government shill. He spends his entire life debunking NASA, flat Earth, and chemtrails. That's his entire life, 24/7.
I never like to use the word shill. However, with Mick West, man, come on. This guy, like, seriously, if there's one person I would say, okay, this guy's on the payroll, it's Mick West. This guy's made a career out of, like, that's what he does full time, is just debunk chemtrails and flat Earth now. So he was recently on a debate.
Nathan Oakley's debate.
Is it Nathan?
Nathan Oakley. Nathan Oakley.
Nathan Oakley, I'm sorry.
Who does the flat Earth debate every day. God bless him. I don't know how he does it with those globers.
Well, he loses his temper too. So
yeah.
his blood gets up there. Interestingly enough, Mick joined in on one of the conversations, and Nathan actually kind of got him to concede that they added some assumptions into his calculator on Metabunk, and it was kind of a victory.
That assumption is the radius of the Earth.
Yeah, with the radius of the Earth. That's right.
He admitted it.
Check that out. It's on Nathan Oakley's channel. I would definitely call it a score one for the flat Earth.
Mark Sargent recently, it's been a while now since we recorded, but came out with clue number 13 about spacesuits. Did we talk about that last week?
I don't know if we did or not. It was.
I don't think
it was right around the recording. We maybe we did, but I'll say this. I don't know if I said this last week or not. It's worth saying again if I did. Hats off to Mark. It goes hand in hand with what I've said for a while on this podcast, that I think the flat earthers should be focusing on NASA. When you're trying to bring people to the flat earth, go to NASA first. Attack NASA first, because it's so easy to discredit them. Mark's video kind of takes that same approach with, he put himself out there and said, you know what, I'm going to make a challenge for anyone to produce a spacesuit. I will get in it and go into a vacuum. If you can produce a NASA authorized spacesuit that supposedly works in a vacuum.
Those suits they look like a high-tech snowboard outfit. If you're going to even low pressure, you would blow up like the Michelin State Marshmallow Man. Think about the training they do, which he points out. They train in a pool. In a pool, you have pressure. Everything's trying to get in. Mm-hmm. In space, everything's trying to get out. There's nothing, you couldn't come up with a possible simulation that could be farther opposed to what really happened.
No, they couldn't come up with something more backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
That's what I tried to say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. You could not come up with anything more opposite of the conditions that you're going to experience in space, even down to the movements. Think about it. Like when you try to move quickly in water, what happens? The water pressure around you slows you down. You can't run underwater, right?
Right.
What would happen in space? In a vacuum.
You would go faster. Everything would be faster.
Everything would be simple. Yeah, a movement would be simple.
Right.
Because there's no resistance at all. But yet they train these guys to go out on their spacewalks and do their little wrench fixes in a pool, which is the opposite, folks. It doesn't work.
You ever watch a spacewalk? All they're doing is putting on a bolt or taking off a bolt.
Oh, yeah.
And they're having such difficulty doing it with those thick gloves on. There was one spacewalk where you could see the astronaut's thumb sticking through the suit.
Right. I would have loved to have seen the video of the assembly up there in space, because they must have had a couple dozen guys out there tightening up those bolts for the first time.
How many guys did they have pulling everything into place?
Right.
And then are they doing it? Hey, Charlie, send over the drill gun or whatever. Mission Control would have to be watching with cameras.
Yeah.
Forget about the delay, the 40 minutes of blackout every 90 minutes. Oh.
How did they get the whole thing up there? Do you know? What do they say?
Supposedly there was launches, but they didn't publicize the launches. There goes another one with another section of the space station. I do remember a couple of launches. But again, they're launches that I don't even think they weren't even real fake launches. They just said they did launches.
Gotcha. So they literally claimed that they launched up the space station in pieces and then assembled it up there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Everyone who is, like Scott said, he thinks there's lots of Globers that listen to the show or whatever. If you're on the fence or not on the flat earth side, you really need to ask yourself how that would be possible to assemble a football field-sized spaceship while moving 17,500 miles an hour around an Earth in a near vacuum setting. Just how likely, or I should say unlikely, that would be.
They would say that if you're going 17,000 miles an hour and something else is going 17,000 miles next to you and there's no air, you wouldn't even know that you were moving. They're relative to each other.
Yeah. So what if you drop a wrench? What happens? Does the wrench continually move 17,005 miles?
That's what they would say.
Oh, man. Wow.
And getting it together airtight, first try. It's just so nonsensical. I don't know. I'm speechless when it comes to the space station, and people just believe it. Well, they had to have built it.
Right. They had to have. So it's up there, right?
Yeah.
So they had to have.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. What was the other thing you were going to tell me? You were going to tell me something about flat smacking your sister.
My sister we don't talk about anything conspiratorial. I was on my phone and asked me to send her a video. It's just a family video or something and I thought that's what was in my clipboard, but I accidentally sent her flat Earth video. It was a debunking video from Red Flag Media.
Okay.
The one that debunking the girl, that woman that was like, flat earthers are stupid because, they think we live on a disc. And I sent her that. So the door has been open. Soon we'll say either my sister will be a flat earther or she won't be talking to me.
Oh, my goodness.
Did you hear that Alexa no longer plays the Flat Earth podcast when you ask her to, but she says she's going to fetch the latest episode and then plays some dumb podcast and says it's the Flat Earth podcast.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're warm. You're flying over the target when they start taking shots. She used to play it all the time.
Yeah. A little sad.
All right. So I'll tell you what, Dave, we've covered a little bit of the news stuff and video stuff in this opening segment. Why don't we take a short break and go ahead and get M. Scott Veach, the son of a NASA astronaut, on the line with us and to help us out in the discussion while talking about NASA. I can't think of anyone else but Jaron to join us.
Right. He's that'll be great. We'll come back shortly and have a pleasant conversation with M. Scott Veach.
Yes, and I'm sure Jaron's listening in right now. He's probably already on. But so, Jaron, after the break, just feel free to join us. And
unmute and come on.
Unmute your mic. All right, so when we come back, folks, we're going to have the son of an astronaut right here on the Flat Earth Podcast.
Following announcement has been paid for by
the Flat Earth
Podcast.
You want to leave a digital voicemail for us? Head over to theflatearthpodcast.com and click on the blue link that reads, "Got a question? Send us a message."
You can do it from your iPhone or from your computer. First time you do it on your cellular phone, you'll have to download a little app. But after that, you can leave us all kinds of messages. If you want to be anonymous, you can make up a name, make up an email address. We don't care. We just want to hear what you have to say.
We'll do our best to play or answer these questions and comments on future episodes right here on the Flat Earth Podcast. Download the SpeakPipe app and check us out at theflatearthpodcast.com.
The Flat Earth
Podcast.
If you're watching this audio on YouTube right now and you're not familiar with the world of podcasting, there's a far better way to listen to the Flat Earth Podcast each and every week.
Think of it like your TiVo or your DVR is to your television. You subscribe to whatever show that you like. Whenever a new episode comes out, it records it, downloads it, and notifies you that there's a new episode for easy listening anywhere. Another great feature on most podcast players is you could speed up if you want to hear stuff even faster, or more importantly, it has a jump back and jump forward 30 seconds so you could skip annoying announcements like this.
We're on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and so many more. If we're not on your favorite podcast app, send us a message and let us know to make sure we will be.
the Flat Earth
Podcast.
Look, guys, getting real tired of saying this. This is a podcast, okay? You're lucky Dave is still willing to upload it to YouTube. It's not going to always be there, okay? You need to start preparing now, just like Brian Austin Lambert says. One day, this will not be on YouTube. You need to switch to a podcast platform. This is Matt Long, flatwork.com, over and out.
Hey guys, my name is M. Scott Veach. I am a baller. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I guess a lot of ballers are, which is pretty cool. Although I have to admit, you guys do infuriate me quite a lot, but in a good way, I think. Anyway, I think you guys do a great job, and I dig it. I guess you guys do have a particularly harsh view, I think, of people who believe the ball, and I think you paint us with too broad of a brush. So many times I've heard you talk about how we just believe what we're told from people in white coats and how we don't really understand stuff. And a lot of that stuff is just not true. And I just feel like you guys have closed yourself off so much to hearing our explanations or hearing what we know that I think it's doing you a disservice. Even if you guys are ultimately right, I think it's doing you a disservice. That, however, is not why I am calling. I just want to actually let Jay know that I love his get-rich-quick scheme. Arbitraging gold sounds fun. Unfortunately, you buy and sell gold by mass, not by weight. So a mass is invariant. It won't matter where you are in the world. It'll cost and sell the same.
All right, back with us here on the Flat Earth Podcast. And Dave and Jaron, the speak pipe that we just played seconds ago was actually one that came in last week. I think we heard from one of our listeners that M. Scott Veach was actually sort of well known in the Flat Earth, Globe Earth debate world, that his father was in fact an astronaut. So Dave reached out to M. Scott Veach, and we've got him on the line with us. Are you there with us right now?
I am. How's it going, guys?
Going great, man. And we appreciate I think we said it, I don't know if you heard the podcast last week, but we did respond and said thank you for
I did.
for sending in such a great spirited speak pipe anyway from the Globe side. So we appreciate that. And we thought, you know what, we could have a good civilized discussion here. I believe you might have said that something or another along the lines in an email or something that you saw a lot when you were growing up. And
yes.
Yeah, we'd love to get your take on that. And then also ask you questions as well. Is that cool?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds awesome.
So what do we call you? M. Scott?
That was my next question.
MSB?
The M is from Marshall, but everyone calls me Scott.
Scott. Okay. That was my next question too, Dave.
I have the M because I work in Hollywood, and you have to like pick a unique name when you join the unions or whatever. And there's another Scott Veach, so I threw the M on front.
You had to be M. Scott. Gotcha.
Yeah, it makes you sound formal.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about Charles Lacey Veach, your father, who was in fact a NASA astronaut. Tell us a little bit about what your dad did.
So he was a shuttle astronaut. So he went up in 1990, I think, in 1992. Sometimes it's funny, there's some people out there that are such space nuts. Like I'll say something like that to somebody, or he'll come up and they'll be like, "Well, actually, your dad went up in early 91 and 90," and I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And they'll suddenly know all these facts that I don't know. But I think it was 90 and 92. 2 shuttle missions. He was a mission specialist. He was an Air Force pilot before that, a fighter pilot. He was in like Vietnam and stuff. But the Air Force didn't think that he'd make the cut. They didn't think that he'd get accepted into the astronaut corps. So they wouldn't sponsor him. I guess you have to get sponsored. So he quit the Air Force and then applied as a civilian. And then when he did get in, because he applied as a civilian, he wasn't allowed to be a pilot, which was kind of his like he definitely was always bugged that he never got to fly the shuttle. So he was a mission specialist, which meant that he did experiments and stuff like that. And so I guess, that happened when I was I was probably in 3rd grade. So I basically grew up sort of, with him at NASA. All of his friends were astronauts. Like a lot of my friends were other astronaut kids. So it was sort of it's like a front row seat to sort of seeing just what was really going on a day-to-day, every single day level. A very, very sort of intimate perspective, I feel like. And a lot of times when I hear people talk about, NASA and what's real and what's not about it, it's always interesting because I always feel like it comes from a perspective of sort of so far outside that I never quite know how to take it,
Your father had passed away pretty young, I believe.
Yeah.
And so I hope you don't take anything that we say in any disrespect whatsoever, but I have to ask you, if Flat Earth is right and NASA is fake, like we all truly have researched and believe, do you think that your father would tell you that he was in this scam when you were in 3rd grade?
I don't think, no, not in 3rd grade, for sure not.
And once you start a lie like that, you can never, it would be almost impossible for him to get out of it. And if we're right again, he would be sworn to secrecy forever, and he would have to do this. There would be no way he could tell you for many reasons. And 2, a little boy and his dad, you looked up. He was your hero. He wasn't just your dad. He was a spaceman.
Well, it's funny. I didn't care about that stuff at all because it was so part and parcel of my world. I didn't even realize other people would care until I got to college. But growing up, it was just it was literally boring. In fact, all I did was complain that he had an opportunity to move to Florida to fly F-15s at one point, and I just kept, for years, I would harass him why we could be living in Florida instead of Houston? Why didn't we move? So I didn't really think it was that big a deal at the time. And you're right. Obviously, he would be lying to me as a 3rd grader. And where you might not be right is as I got older, and then as I got to know him more as a person, I got to see what his personality was like, and I got to, we got to actually know each other as adults, which didn't last very long because he did die young. But in that phase, I can't say for sure, but my gut feeling is that he would have at least implied or hinted. And I will tell you this, on his deathbed, he was really cool. Like he was like laid back and like, he was the kind of guy where he would just, I did this on his deathbed. I was like, bro, like, this is it. This is your chance. Are there aliens underneath the White House? Anything, Roswell, Area 51, give me something, dude, like something. And he didn't. He was like, he laughed and he was like, I swear to you, if I had anything exciting to tell you, I would tell you. Nothing. I have nothing for you. And I was like, come on. I really wanted a little detail, but he gave me nothing.
Oh, well, hats off to you for asking him. That's awesome.
So I have a question, Scott. Do you know if you are a military guy like that, and even if you leave the Air Force or whatever, do you still have the oath that you were you dedicated yourself to the United States and all that?
I don't know, but I will say this: if my dad, I don't think it would take an oath to make him keep quiet. You know what I mean? Like, I think if he thought it was good to keep quiet, he'd keep quiet. And it's hard for me to imagine that would be him. But I don't know if the oath applies, quote unquote. But also, honestly, let's say the Earth is flat, okay, and let's say they were lying. Who knows exactly what the real rules and regulations of some oath would be? For all we know, they take some oath that transcends military service or transcends everything. You know what I mean? Like, it would all be so secret at that point, anything could go, I guess.
You're fighting our fight here. It's exactly what I would be saying.
Well, I don't know if you guys have heard, but like I definitely have this attitude of like people should be more open to the other side. You know what I mean? Like, I'm open to exploring and playing around with what if. I also happen to know from personal experience, all my evidence from like being at NASA, nothing tells me that this is the case, but it doesn't hurt me to say, okay, well, let's imagine what would it be like if it was,
So what would be, your explanation if somebody asked how we could have gone in 1969, 250,000 miles, and then NASA as an organization that gets $52 million a day still can't go past 250 miles. What would be, why is space the only technological advance in the history of the world to regress like it has?
I can give you the political reason, the historical reason, which is that we didn't get a lot of value out of the moon, right? Like, the moon does not turn out to be a particularly valuable place to go visit, and it's very expensive. And Nixon evidently was incredibly disappointed. Like, it was this big rush, this big craze in '69. Everybody watched the moon landings, right? By the time they got to that sixth moon landing, like, no network wanted to air it. Like, people just were not into it anymore. The fun had worn off. And Nixon was disappointed in the results. Like, we brought back moon rocks. Great. You know what I mean? It's like there was no real model for us to get any kind of strategic value out of it. And so they had a choice. There was two things on the table at the time. It's either we could extend our long-range capabilities, or we could focus on low Earth orbit. And if we focus on low Earth orbit, we'll save a ton of money, and we can do all these cool things. And that, and that was a decision, a political decision got made. Then all the funding went to the shuttle. That's where the shuttle program started. And originally, there was supposed to be a space station that was called the shuttle because it was going to shuttle people from ground to the space station and back. And very, very quickly, they ran out of money. They scrapped the space station idea, and it just became a shuttle to space, like no station. And that's, I think it's why it regressed, is that it wasn't clear what the value was. And we had this other thing that was kind of quote unquote a regression, but we could get value out of that, and it was way cheaper. So just the political zeitgeist shifted.
So if Russia was who we've been told, wouldn't it be something that would be pretty easy for them to figure out? I mean, if we went 6 times, nobody died, nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be something that Russia would pick up on within 5 or 10 years, and then they would be the first on the moon? And I do say there is something valuable there. If you could go to the moon and you have nuclear weapons, you are the leader of the world, because you can stand on the moon and you can threaten to shoot any country at any time from the moon.
Well, yes, but I think though, by understanding, and we could quickly get into areas I'm definitely like going to be no more expert than you guys are. But my understanding is that, okay, shooting a nuke from a satellite is is way easier and no worse strategically than shooting from the moon. I mean, it is still a long way away. You got to get there, and it is hard to get those nukes and all that to work. I mean, that's operational work. And the other thing is, my understanding is they beat us with Sputnik, right? And then we were paranoid as all hell, and we raced as fast as we could because we were like, we got to beat them, we got to beat them, we got to beat them. We get there, we go on the third mission, and somewhere in there, like, intelligence reports start to come back, and we realize they're not even at like 1964 yet. Like, they completely dropped the ball in this space race. And that's I think also part of why we sort of just shifted our focus, because there was no danger of them catching up anytime soon, because somewhere along the line, and I forget what exactly the details were, but I remember reading like,
well, the details are that they found out they were faking it all. They found out that they were faking,
okay,
and the United States said, well, we can fake the moon landing, and they can't say anything, because if they do, they can tell the world that they're faking it. And when you're leading your country along with this idea that you're this, it was a game of who can fake better. You're from Hollywood, and you know who would win. You would know who would win, United States or Russia.
And I'll say this too, Scott. Assuming that your theory is correct, that it was all legit. You mentioned that, well, putting a nuke on a satellite is just as easy or easier to fire from a satellite. The difference would be, theoretically, I guess what Jaren's point is the reason no one's ever launched nukes is, we always hear because their finger's on the button, but as soon as Russia were to launch against us, well, then we would find out and launch against them. So in effect, by pushing the button, sure, they would hit us first, but then their people, their civilians, everyone else would be nuked just the same.
Yeah.
The difference is if, like Jaren, in Jaren's hypothetical question was, had Russia said, you know what, let's get up there and let's colonize, you could keep your civilians safe. You could fire a nuke and not necessarily, if you're on the moon, your people are at least safe.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Whereas a satellite's just a missile flying around.
Hang on. This is all conjecture about bombs that don't exist. We're getting off the track here. Scott, do you find it odd that even though the moon has no strategic purpose, from your point of view, that we lost the technology, we lost all of the what's the word? Telemetry tapes.
Telemetry.
all the telemetry tapes. There's no real footage that doesn't have problems with it. Don't you have any issues with that?
Well, okay. So starting with the technology, in terms of destroying the technology, what Pettit meant, in my opinion, and I think it's very reasonable. I know you guys have heard this before, but I'm very much a subscriber to he's just referring to the fact that when we switched over to the shuttle, with these single-use rockets stopped getting used, the entire infrastructure switched. And in the same way that, like, right now, they're talking about going to Mars and they have that Orion project, in the same way that they're not, rebuilding the Saturn V in 2018, it's like we've lost that technology to the extent that we'd have to start from scratch to build the kind of technology to get out of LEO. Not so much because we accidentally destroyed it, but just because we shifted our focus. And as a natural consequence of that, infrastructure and personnel and technology, it all sort of gets, set to a different direction. I don't believe that he's claiming that we destroyed it, like we can't prove we win or anything like that. Now, in terms of the telemetry data, well, so some of it is still available. A lot of it, even, like I think 4,000 tapes. And I was actually, interestingly enough, I just saw the contents of one like about a week ago. There's a guy, he found one on eBay of all places. He sent, I guess they pop up from time to time. And there's a guy at NASA, and he'll run it through, and you can look at the data. And I was looking through this data, and this telemetry tape, it's pretty darn boring. I mean, here's where the capsule was, here's what the temperature was, here's what this bio reading was, here's what this radiation reading was, and that's it. Just for on and on and on and on. And then the thing that's really heartbreaking, obviously, is the original footage of the landing, right? There's no getting around the fact that's pretty heartbreaking. And we kind of, we know what happened. We know where the mistake was made. We know kind of why it was made. In retrospect, it's unfortunate, but we also do have it isn't like we don't have copies of that video. We've seen it. We just don't get to see it at high resolution, but it is heartbreaking. I mean, it is definitely an unfortunate situation.
In a court of law, though, if it's a court of law and you ask, it's us against them, they're going to lose before it even gets started, because they've lost the main piece of evidence that supports their case. I mean, that's pretty bad for the number one human accomplishment of all time.
But don't forget, we do have, if you look at the Freedom of Information Act on this stuff, we have so much stuff that is preserved that does, evidence that we went, or, all this data, 10,000 or 10,000 pages of just pure, navigational data. We have every single word spoken between them and Capcom for all 6 flights. We have the, which is, by the way, I read through that recently, and it's in turn both boring and also in times totally fascinating. Perhaps the most fascinating thing to me was how they'd get off on these random topics and start they'd have a riff of 4 lines about some baseball team that doesn't even exist anymore, stuff like that.
Speaking of talking to them on the moon and what they said earlier in the show, we were discussing a video that recently came out analyzing the talk from Houston to the moon. Now, you do believe that radio signals can't go faster than the speed of light. Would you agree with that?
That's right. I agree with that.
So the time it takes light to go from the Earth to the moon is 1.23 seconds. So if you were on the moon and I said something, it would take 1.23 seconds for you to get to you.
Yep.
And then if you responded without even thinking, it would take 1.23 seconds to get back. But there's numerous examples where Houston would say something and 0.6 seconds later, they would respond back. We would hear the response back. That shows that it's fake.
Well, I know you may have an example that I don't know of, but I know the one that came out maybe 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago. And I looked at that one. I was very curious because I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. And what I discovered was that all the cases in which, who was it again? Was it Taboo Conspiracy or maybe Celebrate Truth? Who
Rich
did that?
from Mr. Thrive and Survive.
That's right. Okay, Thrive and Survive. What I found was that the samples that he was using that he claimed were on the moon, when I went and looked them up, they were from day one. They were from 9,000 miles away from the Earth. So he's got this text, right? And he's looking at the timing. They weren't on the moon then. What I looked up, they were literally only 9,000 miles away. They had just barely gotten started.
That's interesting.
And I think somehow a mistake was made when he was looking at the stuff. He was claiming that it was on the moon. But when I'm telling you, when I looked it up, I found that stuff and I found it was only 9,000 miles away.
I'd like to see that. Do you? Last question. I'll let you guys go. What about the 7-second delay for the space shuttle? I mean, for the International Space Station, that's only 250 miles away. How do you explain that even being a possibility?
I don't know I don't know if this is true. I always heard that it relays through something is what I heard. It seems like it seems like a reasonable answer to me. I don't have a problem with it, but I couldn't prove it or anything. But I've heard that, doesn't it relay through a satellite and go down to some communication center and then get over to Houston?
Now, I was going to say, in the middle of the conversations, that sometimes they would respond or react as the person's talking, and then they would wait. You can tell that they're just totally screwing up because they're hearing it and their face is responding to it, and then they pretend and they wait, and then they respond more. Yeah. Why hasn't a astronaut on the shuttle taken their iPhone, FaceTime somebody on Earth, and went around and looked up and do-si-doed around somebody else on a live broadcast? Why hasn't anybody ever done that?
Well, iPhone. I don't think an iPhone will work, but something like that, you mean?
Yeah, anything. Right. Just take the camera that's filming them, spin it around, do a 360, look up, look around, float around your partner, spin around 3 times. None of that ever happens. Look out the window. Show us where you are.
Yeah. But you don't think some of those tours count? Like when they do an hour-long continuous tour where they're like,
I've actually analyzed that, and so a lot of people. There's so many little edits and little problems with those, but they can do it. The movie Gravity did a fantastic job with it. That's not live. Who knows if that's even a real person that we're looking at? That could be a computer graphic person.
Right. But doesn't that suggest a little bit of a catch-22? Because okay, you just said, well, why haven't they done this thing, right? And let's say we got their attention. And by the way, I do think Flat Earth is growing. I think it's growing fast, and I do think it's getting their attention. I think it's getting everybody's attention. And so let's say they get to their attention. They're like, okay, you know what? We need to address this Flat Earth thing. So let's have a guy do everything you said, do-si-do, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a little bit of a catch-22 because as soon as they do that, it is true. It's an absolute true statement. You're going to say, well, look at Gravity. Of course they can fake that. And so it becomes like, well, why did they do it in the first place? Because There's no winning. You know what I mean?
There are some things that we would have a problem because they can fake them. But I think Jaron had an idea, or I'm not sure whose it was, where they would take a camera from launch to connecting to the space station, unedited, and show the whole thing, pointed at Earth from the time it takes off all the way up. And how come they haven't done something as simple as that? We could fund that for them.
Maybe they will now that they're starting to realize that they're losing this marketing war. And I think they are losing the marketing war. Like I always tell people, I think the thing that Flat Earth has a genius skill at is marketing. They are better marketers than the Globe side. 10 days to Sunday. It's incredibly how much better they are at marketing. And I think that they're better than NASA too. And I think that NASA's going to eventually
when you have a good product, it's easy to market.
Yeah. And some genius meme makers. I mean, there are some good marketers, really.
One question, and this is a little off topic. Were there any times during your youth that you were taken to NASA or somewhere on a regular basis where you don't remember what happened, where you lost some time?
No, but I did go to NASA on a regular basis. Like I walked to NASA from high school to get a ride home with my dad. So I hung out there for an hour and a half in the astronaut office, probably I don't know, twice to 3 times a week, all through high school. And so I was there a lot, but I don't have any lost memories. And my experience being there, the amount of verisimilitude, how when like if somebody's telling you a story about something they did and you have some knowledge of it, like if they're lying, you can pick up. And when they're telling the truth, it's like, oh, you can just hear the truth coming out of the edges. Like sitting there in the astronaut office all those years, like it felt truthful, like the work they're doing. I'm overhearing them arguing with Italy about this or that, all of it had that verisimilitude feel, in my opinion.
Did your dad ever phone you from space, from the shuttle or anything like that?
No, but we did have to give no, we didn't have to, but they asked us to give messages, for the astronauts. And you guys remember Jack Handy?
Yeah, Deep Thought.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the message. I was just a kid, but the message I sent to my dad was like a Jack Handy that was like, if you're in space and one of the astronauts becomes a vampire, and that's how it starts. Like, and I forget how it ends, but it just goes on and on to absurdity, like a Jack Handy does. And I now think back, like, so cringy. Like I was like a 15-year-old, whatever. I thought it was funny, but I just wonder. My dad was probably so embarrassed. Like, why did my son do that?
I just watched an older one of my videos the other day, and I did a Deep Thoughts by Jaron. And said, sometimes I wish I was Buzz Aldrin.
That's awesome. That's great.
Sometimes I wish I was Buzz Aldrin. Then I remember who Buzz Aldrin is.
That's so mean, but it's funny.
I have a sort of a general question, not specific to any points, for or against NASA, but just for you personally, because a lot of our audience, without a doubt, their knee-jerk response to us speaking with an astronaut's son is going to be that, well, indoctrination is super powerful. There's no way in the world someone raised by an astronaut is ever going to admit this. I mean, this is like almost worse than an astrophysicist, because they're going to be their heels are going to dig in so much. So my question is this, for those out there who are wondering that, do you, and I actually heard this question at the top of a debate recently, but it's do you have the ability to change your mind in the face of new evidence? And how do you respond to the fact that there are people that will say there's no way he's ever going to admit any of this?
Yeah. Well, so second question first, I'll say, like, yes, I am no stranger to that. Like, you guys can probably imagine, Globers started picking the fight first, but at this point, the fight goes both ways. And I mean, I show up in a chat room now, and I mean, I'll put it this way, I get a death threat a week. I get about a death threat a week saying, fuck you and your, can I not say that probably? To hell with you and your father, who's a lying liar, and your shill family, and just all this stuff. And it's just like, I hope you guys burn in hell. It's like, okay. So I definitely know that happens. And on some level, the best thing I can say is, it's not true. I think I'm super open-minded. I think that if I got evidence of flat Earth, I would believe it in a heartbeat. I would be excited to believe in flat Earth. A lot of Globers get really mad about this question. They act like, no, I'm absolutely certain that I'd never, it couldn't happen. And then they say, like, they're almost mad at the idea that it could be a flat Earth. And if I think of that, like I think of the situation if tomorrow it suddenly was, and think, that would be pretty much the coolest thing to ever happen to any of our lives. Like, we would have been alive at a time in which the entire paradigm of the entire world gets wrenched in the opposite direction in one moment. And then we would get to see what happens next. Like, who would not want to be in that world? Like, that would be the most exciting day in the history of my life, I bet you.
Scott, that's a great attitude you have there. And for somebody to realize that, oh my God, I don't live on a spinning ball, that's tough enough, but it's compounded for you, because not only do you have to realize that your whole life was a lie about being on a spinning ball, like we all had to, you would have to face the fact that your deceased father, God rest his soul, was lying to you your entire life. Yeah. I don't know if a happy boy could actually do that without having a mental breakdown.
It would be tough.
If I was a kid, maybe you'd be right. But, I'm headed towards 40. So at this point, I would just think like, oh, wow, that must have been a weird life for my dad.
We all have the inner kid inside us. I'm older than you, and I'm still a kid.
I mean, I could be wrong, but my genuine feeling is I would be more interested and more like, wow, what a weird life he lived, and I never knew. I don't think I'd be offended, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm naive.
Let me hit this one follow-up, Jaron, and then you can hit it.
Okay.
So do you, answering, the question, do you have the ability to change your mind in the face of new evidence? I guess you're saying yes.
Yeah.
And to turn it around, because flat earthers always get asked this question. I know I've been asked this. Well, what would it take for you to really believe that we're on a ball, right? So let me ask you this: not talking about flat Earth or globe, but just NASA in general. There's so much evidence, quote unquote evidence, if you will, out there that implies that NASA is being less than honest, to put it nicely. What would it take you to say, okay, maybe they are lying? What piece of evidence would it take? I mean, we've got things that insinuate green screen. We've got the regressive technology. All these things. What would it take for Scott Veach to say, yeah, okay, maybe they are lying?
I'll tell you what it would take. It would okay. So we can categorize a huge amount of the evidence against NASA. We can categorize a huge amount of it as subjective eyeballing. So like people. Okay, so for example, the Epic Discovery satellite, right? People look at the Epic Discovery images and they say, obviously fake. Okay. They announce it sort of from a subjective perspective view. And then they add that to the column of, oh, look, obviously fake. And then they look at, I don't know, let's say some anti-gravity, or they look at the fact that there's not the do-si-do footage that Dave wanted. So they say, no do-si-do footage. They add that to the column. And then what happens, I believe, is that all these things start to add up for them. And then they take them all and then they weigh them and they say, aha, NASA is fake. But then the thing that bugs me, the thing that I would need is so many of those things are kind of this weird, like they're very dangerously biasly confirming, because it's like, it's hard to tell whether something's CGI from eyes or just because they don't have a do-si-do doesn't mean it's none of them are really compelling in and of itself. And what I would need, I think, is something that was just like an actual piece of objective evidence, rather than something that I have to interpret.
The problem with that is it's going to be very tough for you to find that, because they're in charge of their world. So they're not going to let something out that is going to be something that can be proven in the way that you're looking. I mean, here's the sad thing. The thing is that the flat Earth and the belief of it is insane. It is in the face of all that we've been taught and all the evidence and the textbooks and all the professors. And it's crazy to believe in a flat Earth. However, the only reason that people believe in a flat Earth is because of NASA. I mean, if it wasn't for NASA being the worst at everything they've ever done, they are a completely inept organization. They think of this. I mean, they have provided nothing for humanity. I mean, your dad, all respect.
Yeah. Well, Tang, don't forget Tang, right. Tang and Velcro. Yeah. Come on.
But I mean, really, when you look at what they've done in the time that they've had to do it, they've done nothing. There's nothing that we can say, thank NASA, we have this. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have it. There's just nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So in my opinion, anyway, that you are right, though. I don't think there'll be proof like you're looking for, because we have to look at what they give us and then, definitely make some assumptions. I mean, have you seen the video of Tim Peake when he's giving the interview and he doesn't do the little ball trick on a track live?
I thought I'd seen everything, but I'm not. That doesn't ring a bell. No.
I mean, look at that one, because it's interesting that they have some people in studio, a girl that's a high school girl or something, who sent up a apparatus for Tim to do on the space station. It was basically like a circular track with a ball on it, and he was supposed to show the ball go around this little track. And she has a version here in the studio, and they say, okay, show us what it does with gravity. And she shows the ball goes up the track, but just comes right back down. And then they said, okay, and now let's go to Tim in the space station. And Tim couldn't do this live, so he recorded it earlier, and then they show him in front of that blue checkered screen doing it very awkwardly. And then they go to him and he explains, oh, well, it's such a great environment here to do tests in microgravity. I mean, things like that, people need to have red flags go off. Like, wait a second, this is I'm talking a track as big as a half a basketball, and a ball is a marble. So you're talking, I mean, how can he have not done that live?
Live. Well, do we know why? Did he say any reason why?
No.
Yeah.
And I guess on the same lines of that, according to your answer, because I understand your answer as far as like when people are looking at these things that like Jaren's mentioning, or all these video glitches or whatever, they're subjective, maybe, okay, or you could classify them as circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
Somebody broke down that video of him, the recording of him doing it, and his hand seems to go through the track. Like it wasn't really there.
I think that's for sure what's going on, because you can tell that he does it in front of the blue checkered screen, and he has to stay very still, and he's looking at a camera that's pointed straight up, pointed straight down from the ceiling. And it seems to be that that's what they were doing, that they were either superimposing the ball or the track into his hand. If there's other reasons that this could be the case, then people need to start coming forward with those, because the answer we always get is, you guys are crazy, like you just said. It's just subjective. Well, how many subjective things do we need to see?
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, but so can I let me throw two thoughts out there because one thought is there are times though, plenty of times, and I don't know how many I can think of right now, but I know if I had some time I can make a long list. But there's times in which you'll hear, look at this piece of footage, it's so damning, it looks a certain way, and then I'll look into it and I'll discover that it's really not damning at all. It'll turn out to be very much a misconception. Like, for example, that square thing, the blue and white checkerboard thing. A lot of people assumed that was supposed to be a green screen that they forgot to chroma key out, which of course we know now it's not. It's a measuring tool. And
A measuring tool for what?
but for so long that was like a thing.
A measuring tool for what?
For measuring. For like when you throw a ball, I found that they get used in physics classrooms a lot. You throw a ball against it while you're recording, so you can measure like how high did the ball go, and you use the checkerboard things to see how far it went. And of course, if you're really chroma keying something, you wouldn't have all the checkerboard stuff. It makes it very hard to chroma key. But those things are for like you throw things in front of it, videotape what you're throwing in front of it, and then it's like you can see how fast it went. You can measure its velocity. So if you have I don't know, let's say you built a catapult or something in physics class, you can test it over and over, and you record it and then measure it basically. So it's like a measuring device.
Scott, I disagree with your analysis of that. I think that when you just use the term chroma key, that they have technology that's more three-dimensional, that goes way past your standard green screen. I'm sure you saw the clip of the female astronaut where she has the ball and she reaches up and a little stuffed animal appears, and they even put a little beaming in soundtrack. What is your excuse for that?
Well, I can't remember.
And whatever it is, it proves that they can handle
Layering.
layered objects that aren't really there.
Well, my claim is that object is there, and they've matted in front of it a static image, so that it's always sitting there, and it's like they have a locked off frame, so they've matted in front of it. They just lift the mat off at the last end, and so it's always been there, but we just hit it with a mat, basically. It's been a while, but when that first came out, and I believe his name is Mike Hemmick, I think.
Mike Helmick.
Yeah, I saw his original take on that, and I remember sort of working through it and sort of figuring out. And that particular thing looks very much just like a static locked off camera mat to me.
I have one final question for you. Do you actually believe the nonsense that you were saying? No offense.
Yes, I really do. Everyone asks me that all the time. It's like they Pete Shea especially, but lots of people, they say, you're a liar. I may be wrong. At the end of the day,
I don't believe you're a liar. I don't believe you're lying. I believe I don't understand though how you can just make excuse after excuse after excuse. As I started to say before, they built the space station that must have amazing torques and pressure on it. They built it for the first time in space. There's not a picture or video of it being assembled on Earth. And a matter of fact, there's not a picture or video of it being assembled in space, which would be the most videoed thing ever. Construction project, because Mission Control would have to tell these guys in their spacesuits, which make no sense. We've never seen a spacesuit in a vacuum chamber, as Mark Sargent pointed out in clue number 13, and they test underwater. So underwater, everything's trying to get in, and in outer space, everything's trying to get out. How is any of that make any sense in any way, shape, or form?
And just to factor in, just to reiterate something Dave just said, real quick, if in fact they assembled the ISS, a football field-sized space station in space, that to me would actually give the moon landing itself a run for its money as the greatest accomplishment in mankind's history. And yet, once again, the lack of footage. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, so let me just let me give a general response to that, because I do think I have a fair response, which is, you call it, I give excuses for everything, but let's just talk about that one that I just said about the mat. If what I'm saying is true, that's basically Adobe Premiere. First day you've got it, unboxed it. How do you do special effects? It's the cheesiest, simplest, dumbest special effects there exists. And if I'm right, and by the way, I can tell you one thing from firsthand experience: the astronauts have no taste. They are all huge nerds. Nothing they do is cool. Every single thing they do is dorky and just embarrassing. Okay, so that whole bit struck me as classic astronaut, and that whole cheesy use of the mat. If I'm right about that, that's not an excuse. That's trivially obvious if I'm right. Okay, and so I think it's unfair to say that all of them are excuses, because that one's not even an argument if I'm right. I don't have a good answer for why there's not pictures of building the ISS. But I will say this overall: I do not believe that NASA has thought defensively. They do not have in their head people are going to doubt what we're doing. So we need to make sure that we do things to prove it. I think more and more as flat Earth grows, they're beginning to realize a lot of people don't trust them. But I truly don't believe that that's something they had in the forefront of their marketing brains until very recently. And so I think they just never thought to do things to prove stuff. They never thought they'd ever have to. They never really expected to be doubted.
If we were to say, okay, you're right, all evidence against NASA at this point is in fact circumstantial, could be taken one of two ways type thing. Some of them maybe can't be explained, but it's not hard evidence. It's not hard data. Let me ask you this though, for you personally, you said you were open to, actual evidence, but how many, like Jaron implied a second ago, how many instances of circumstantial evidence of some sort of chicanery going on do you or should people accept before we do start asking these questions? Is that a fair question? What's your threshold on the circumstantial evidences?
I think doubting and asking the question is okay, right? I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think you can do that without even one piece of circumstantial evidence. I think you can say, hey, what's going on here? Or I want to look skeptically, or I want more information. I think that's all valid, right? For me personally, the point at which accumulation of say circumstantial evidence would flip me over into actively doubting, it's really hard for me because I tend to be someone who tries to have more humility than certitude. So it's almost by my very nature of my personality, I'm disinclined to be sure one way or the other. I have way more evidence going one way right now. It's hard to know. It's like if the circumstantial evidence was really, really strong, if it was really, really compelling, I just could not come up with any kind of way to understand how it could have happened. Maybe it wouldn't take many. Maybe it would take only 5 really great pieces of circumstantial evidence, some small handful.
What about when we see astronauts being faded in and faded out before they go around a corner? What excuse do you have for that? There's multiple instances of that shows layering, that they're not even in the same room.
And I'll even answer this question for him. That's a subjective thing. It's something that can be seen by observers and said it's fading out, or that's just what the camera's doing. That's what sucks because NASA's in charge of the footage.
Well, the other thing to add to that too is that depending on which one we're talking about, the way compression works can sometimes do that, of course, and that doesn't mean it's all that, but that's possible. The other one is there's one that's like a music video that they made that was so lame, but it involved them using basically every transition in Adobe Premiere. And so I remember there's one where he's swinging through to the right and then he's like a hatch, and he kind of fades out right before he goes out. And then I found this music video where they faded him out right there so that he basically, it was as if he turned around instantly off screen and came zooming back in. It was supposed to be, I think, like a wacky cut, I think, on that one. So there's stuff like that too. But I'm inclined to see most of the fading out stuff as video glitches. That's very common.
NASA only gives us edited short clips all the time. Jaron is trying to get the full spacewalk footage from, you mentioned Freedom of Information Act. Jaron, tell them what's going on there. Are you ever going to get it?
They want $1,000.
Yeah, it's only a 2006 video, and it's actually up to now 13. Well, it's going to be a total of $1,450, which is just it's crazy to think that it would ever be that expensive to reproduce a video. But again, I'm not in charge of what they do with their tapes or whatever. But yeah, I mean that's kind of ridiculous, wouldn't you say?
I hate to be in the position to always have the excuses, but I'm just going to tell you what I honestly think. That they charge so much for everything, and it's like, and having been working, and I mean, having worked in Hollywood, where we do lots and lots of things like that, where people request this or request that. I mean, it's annoying work. Nobody wants to do it. The prices do get jacked up to you see the receipts of some of these prices. I'm just jaw dropped at how much it costs to get. The
difference is that every dollar that NASA's ever been given, every shuttle they've ever built, every rocket they've ever launched, comes from our money. That's the difference.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I think
why don't they just put all the footage out there and just let the hive mind go through it and see what they can find?
Yeah, public dollars should mean public information.
Just post the whole thing. Here's all the footage from the last mission or from whatever.
Yeah,
and let everyone go through it. And I'll give you the answer. The answer is they can't because it's fake.
Well, no, I bet you they would. I would not be surprised if we could. I mean, if we felt like it, we could lobby them into doing that, because I bet you the reason they haven't.
Why
is
don't
mostly,
you do that? Why don't you do that? The son of an astronaut. The son of an astronaut wants to prove that the Earth is not flat and the space is real, and ask for the unedited footage from these spacewalks and all this other nonsense they claim they do.
I will take a pass at it. Just in good faith, I will take a pass at it, because who knows, right? I'll send an email to someone I know and see if at least find out why they won't do it. I'll see what their reason is. I
agree. Yeah, you should do. I mean, and that's to film this. I mean, I've seen these cameras nowadays that are these night vision cameras, and to think that how easy it would be to put. They're expensive for me. They're like $850. But for NASA, that's nothing, right? I mean, look at $52 million a day. So to put one of those, if you go to the ISS footage, the live footage, they are shut down 40 minutes every 90 minutes, and they call that 24/7 footage. How hard would it be to install a night vision camera so that we could see 24 hours, 7 days a week of the... I mean, there's one craft in orbit of the Earth. There's only one Earth. Everybody has one home. It's right here. So why not give us a 24/7 video of it? It's crazy.
Scott, what about the pictures from NASA that show the Earth and they show the curvature, but Florida is wrapping a quarter of the way around the Earth? Lake Tahoe has a massive amount of curvature. And it's obvious they're taking, high aircraft footage and bending it around a ball. It's obvious. So if they're faking that, that tells you something, doesn't it?
Well, but when you say it's obvious, you're talking about the ones in which the continents are missized, right? You're talking about when
talking about all of them.
I don't think that they're all obviously fake.
What if one of them is faked?
Well, the clear fisheye visions one is one he's talking about. The ones that have been wrapped so that clearly it's not real, because maybe Florida takes up a quarter of the globe.
Scott, do you have a picture of the Earth that you think is real that you could share with us?
Well, I think the Epic Discovery ones are real.
Wow. The one with the moon that goes in front of the Earth?
Yep.
So
I do.
Why isn't that moon casting light back at the camera? Because the sun is right shining on it and there's no atmosphere to dull it.
Yeah, but it's because I think it's because it's the relative exposure that we have set in order to see the Earth correctly. We have the moon turned down, basically.
We're done.
I had a question. Speaking of photos from Earth, there's a very well-known piece of footage, maybe 7 minutes long or so, from a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yep.
Where they show the guys in the Apollo mission framing the shot of Earth, turning the lights out in the spaceship, so that it looks as if they're shooting around Earth, when in fact they're shooting through a circular window. What is your take on that piece of footage?
I have to go back and look at that one again. I think I remember the one you're talking about. It's like an arm is in the way or something like that.
Yeah, they're trying to simulate around Earth in the distance.
Yeah. When
in fact all they're doing is blackening out the spaceship in the interior and shooting through a circular window.
Yeah, they're all the way on the other side.
I'll tell you what I did. I went through a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. I went through every single claim, and I went deep on every single claim. And what I discovered, and I don't remember. I'd have to look again. But what I discovered was, it's really, really compelling if you go to a certain level of depth. And then if you keep going research-wise, you can find all kinds of things that suddenly make it not so compelling anymore. And I found that to happen over and over and over with Cybrel. And I think, too, like for example, let's go back. Just to be fair, I want to just go back real quick to that one last one and say, but we know how cameras work, and we know that cameras have limited range of exposure. And we know that if we want to have two objects that have varying brightnesses involved, we know that we have to adjust one, pick one or the other, and we know that's going to affect the other. So why is it so ludicrous? Why do you guys think that these explanations that are generally given, like the explanations for why we don't see stars, why do they all sound so ludicrous to you when, to me, they sound like, well, that is how cameras work. I've used a camera and I would have to do that, and now it makes perfect sense.
That does make sense to me.
I could take a shot of the moon during the day and it's bright enough where it's way brighter than that during the day. My crappy little camera can see that. The moon is bright enough to cast shadows on the Earth. I can read by the moonlight. Show me a dirty, dusty ball that can reflect light like that. And then if you really want to get into it, look into the inverse square law on how bright that moon has to be over that distance. But when the astronauts went to the moon, it stayed the same brightness the whole way. And when they got there, it was pretty dim, if you ask me.
And to me, when it comes to the stars, real quick, Scott, I've never been one to argue the fact that the contrast excuse. I get it. If I go outside with a simple camera and and I don't adjust or I don't get a specifically made camera to do so, if I take a picture with a flash outside of my kids in the backyard, yes, that's totally correct. It will not pick up the stars that the human eye picks up. However, how do you explain the fact that all these astronauts have different answers when asked about stars in space?
Well, I think it's because they're talking about different things. There's a great video that Greater Sapien, I don't know if you guys have followed him yet at all, but he makes pretty good videos and he's a pretty decent guy. Like he's not like he doesn't pick a fight and mostly. And he's got a great video on the stars where he went through and he did a deep cut on that. And every time he found one that was like a typically brought up as look, contradiction, he brought out the wider range of the interview to show exactly what the context of what they're talking about is. And over and over and over, it made the original cuts you've seen of like the contradictions, it made them look like they were kind of disingenuously cut, because when you pulled out the greater context, they would actually be more specific, and they would say, well, when we were on the dark side, we would see the stars, and then as you came around, we would not. And I mean, they would go into detail, and it was really, I think, eye-opening. And I want to say one other thing before on the moon, which is,
you mean nonsensical?
I found it really eye-opening.
You totally left out Leroy Chow. Leroy Chow says that you cannot see the stars on the sun side of Earth.
Yeah, I believe that.
You cannot see them on the sun side of Earth.
On the sun side. On the sun side, right? Because it's
okay,
too
but
bright.
now go watch the two guys, Massimo and the other guy, and they say that you can see them on the sun side. On the day side of Earth, you can see them.
Yeah.
Neil Tyson says you should be able to see them. There's no atmosphere to drown out the sun.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So the two guys that you're talking about, that was a good one where when they brought it out, they were talking about during the transition from the sun side to the evening side, they end up being more specific like that. And they end up talking about as we were coming around the edge of the sun side or whatever, we could start to see them. That's what they said. And that, at least if I'm thinking the same interview, that was one of those ones where I was like, oh, eye-opening. I don't know about Neil Grass, but
Don Pett and the other guy are saying that you can see the Magellanic Clouds, you can see galaxies, you can see all the stars. They're more brilliant than they are on Earth. But then you've got Neil Armstrong saying that the only thing visible in cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the Moon, is the sun and the Earth. That nothing else is visible. So Greater Sapien is being disingenuous when he takes, yes, a lot of people have said, hey, look we can see Neil Armstrong elbow Collins next to him when he says, I didn't think I see any. And that's not true. There's another view that shows that he doesn't elbow him. So Greater Sapien brings that up, and I agree with him that that's a great point for him to bring out. But he's being disingenuous in some of the rest of them by picking and choosing which interviews he shows. It's the same thing.
Maybe so. Although he may have been very good at fooling me, but to me, what I saw was him expanding out to larger segments. And when he expanded out, things became contextualized. But I couldn't say that. I wouldn't want to argue that to death, because I'll go back and look and see with what you told me in mind. I'll go back and check and see how I feel about it again.
I was wondering if the famous press conference of Armstrong, Collins, and the other guy, where I was wondering, are they Russian? Because they kind of act like the Russians do when they watch a launch, where they don't really seem very happy at all. And I'm referring to my DITRH video about the Soyuz launch yesterday, which was completely... Yeah, you know my channel, don't you? So check it out.
Yeah, of course.
And please make some excuses. I would love it.
Can we call them creative explanations?
Yeah, that's better. It's more
desperate attempts to hold on to my reality. That's what
there's a fine line between a creative explanation and an excuse, though.
That's what I'm calling a desperate attempt to hold on to my reality.
I've heard a story about that press conference, which is that the story I heard was that they got out of quarantine on Saturday at like early afternoon or something. Okay. They'd been to the moon. They'd been in quarantine for whatever it was, 3 weeks, 18 days. They get out on Saturday at like 3 or something. And they did exactly what you might expect they should do, which is they went straight to they went straight to like the local astronaut bar with all their friends. They were hungover.
Oh, please. Come on. I have more excitement. I went to the Flat Earth Conference last year, and I'm still jacked up more than those guys are.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they were pansies, obviously, because they were just,
So I have a question, Scott. Before we wrap it up, I want to ask you this, because we've talked a lot about NASA, but you're very familiar with the flat Earth theory and ideas, and you've listened to this show. Are there what points on the flat Earth side have raised your eyebrow, or are there any?
Well, okay, yeah, there are. So I think that the obfuscation arguments are annoying to deal with. I think they are hard to deal with sometimes. I think the Chicago footage that I forget who did it now. I forgot the name of the guy, but those original photos were difficult. And I don't like saying, I don't like saying the word mirage as a reason. Like you talk about excuses, that sounds like an excuse to me. Now
So what's your explanation for the Joshua Nowicki photo?
Yeah, what's your creative explanation?
I'd like to hear it.
No, I believe I believe the claim that these are mirages. I don't think that you can see that every day, but that it turns to ash in my mouth to call.
But you can see it once. Did the Earth flatten out that day? Because if there's curve, there's curve, and it's there every day. What's your excuse for that photo? How did we see the skyline? How do we see it?
This is my point. It's my answer is refraction, but I guess what I'm saying is you asked me what things are compelling, and that gives me pause because I don't refraction turns to ash.
If it was refraction, then as you traveled towards it, it should disappear and then reappear again, right?
It depends, but okay, go on.
So
it really does depend.
Because Rob Skiba got on a boat when he could see it and went all the way across, keeping the camera on it, and it just stayed there, and it got bigger and bigger, just like it would. So unless refraction is bending perfectly as he goes, and there's no... It makes no sense. We can see too far to be on a ball. And the fact that you can't see it some days doesn't mean that it's a ball. If you can see it one day, it's not a ball.
We can also not see stuff. We can see obfuscation a lot. And that is very strong evidence that we're on some sort of curve.
There's 3 baskets things could fall in. It works on a ball Earth, it works on a flat Earth, or it works on both.
Yeah, that's right.
And lots of things fall into the both, where you really can't prove it either way. That's fine. Lots of things like seeing too far and water not curving and things fall into the flat Earth only. There's nothing that falls into the ball Earth only table. Nothing.
No, that's not true. That's not obfuscation. Obfuscation, like when you don't see far enough, when you see things that are blocked.
No. I'm going to explain on a flat Earth. It could just be the atmosphere is too thick and it turns into sky before you can see too far. Therefore, that goes into basket number 3. Give me something that goes into basket number 1.
But that would only be true if when you raise your elevation, you couldn't start to suddenly see it. If you can start to suddenly see it, then the atmosphere wasn't too thick because the atmosphere does not thin that fast.
No, because
you're getting above it. You're going above it.
You're going above the thickest atmosphere is on the bottom, and it thins out as you go up. That falls into basket 3.
No, because the thinness doesn't happen fast enough. If you look at how quickly things thin out, it thins out incredibly slowly. The difference between, say, going up...
So not above water.
No, and I have videos on my channel that I've done with my drone where I can see the sun well after sunset, and then it gets to the point where it just fades out into nothing because it can't get through the thickness of the atmosphere. But down where I was, it was nighttime.
But that last part there, where you say can't get through the thickness of the atmosphere, that's you. That's your hypothesis or your speculation about what's going on.
No, it's not my hypothesis. I have video of the sun fading out into thin air, into thick air.
Hey Scott, let me bring up one thing and then I'll be done. And this is something that's the latest, I don't know, I think it's the biggest thing to be brought up in the flat Earth yet, is the fact that if we're talking about a hump of water that's blocking, say, the buildings in Chicago, and let's say we can't see them at all, right? If we lived in a world where things got larger with distance, okay, pretending that if things get away from you, they got bigger. We know that's not what happens, but let's just pretend for a second. Would that make a difference as to whether or not we could see those buildings over the hump? It would make a difference, right?
Do you mean if they got bigger in terms of
let's just say they got bigger as they went away from you. We know it's the opposite on Earth, but in a make-believe world where things did get bigger, would it make a difference? Well, couldn't we see the buildings if they were twice as big as they went away from you?
Not if that's a perspective effect. No, you would not be able to, just because they got bigger perspective-wise. If you can't see them, if the light's not hitting your eye, then perspective is not going to help you out. You know what I mean? You can't get a sight on them because they're getting bigger via perspective if they never hit your eye in the first place, and vice versa. You can't.
Right. So if something gets smaller with the distance, doesn't that need to be taken into account before you tell us that? Yeah. Why not?
No, because whether the light ray hits your eye or not is the key question, right? And that question is not, you do not have to worry about angular size in order to determine that. The light ray comes down, it hits a object. If there's an unobstructed line between the point that it hits and your eyeball, then you're going to see that point. Now, that's the moment in which you would start to apply angular size. And then you might say that object is going to be smaller than expected or larger than expected, but you're going to see it or not see it based 100% on its actual raw geometry, not on angular size. How big it appears to you, that depends on the angular size.
Even though the horizon ends at 3 miles in front of you, or the hard line of the horizon, and the buildings are 50 miles behind that, you're saying that it doesn't matter their size versus that. Okay.
That's right. That's right. Like if you really like. By the way, I've just about finished on a video on this, and I did 2 hours with Riley on this yesterday. Like I've really been thinking about this and working it through it, and the question of whether you see it or not, or let me put it this way: angular size as the sole cause cannot cause something to be obfuscated or hidden by a foreground element. That will not happen. You can make things get smaller, you can make them get bigger, but what you see is what you see based on the raw geometry. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, I guess, the first time you go through it, but I have a claim that that's true.
I just want to make sure I'm getting you right. Yep. So if I were to take a video of, say I'm sitting on a patio and there's a house across the street that's taller than the patio, but I'm able to put the camera behind the railing of the patio and block that house. You're saying what's going on there? I'm confused. You're saying that wouldn't happen, that cannot happen?
Here's all I'm saying is that angular size by itself can't shrink something behind a foreground object. Angular size. Now, perspective can, distance can, all the things that go into the calculator can, but what doesn't affect whether something is hidden or not from you, angular size does not affect that. The way to think about angular size is, okay, after everything's hit your eye, how big or small do things appear? But they never disappear or appear because of that angularness. When things get adjusted down or up because of your angular size issues, because of perspective, they don't ever change what's you're seeing. The image either enlarges or it shrinks, but nothing like things. The perspective of things doesn't shift from angular size alone.
If you're looking at London from the east coast of the United States, you're not going to see it because of its size has been diminished to nothing. Correct?
Right. You're not going to see it because its raw height is not higher than the bulge. It's not higher than the horizon.
Okay, so I'm saying let's pretend that the Earth is completely flat, completely level plane. Would you see Europe from there?
I suspect you need a telescope, but yeah. What is the distance? Like 2,000 miles or something?
3 or 4, or 3. But I'm saying, do you think? Okay, so you would be able to see with a telescope through all of the atmosphere that sits above the ocean for 3,000 miles?
You know what? I don't know for sure. I'm guessing. I'm gonna guess. Let's see. How far away was that? The world record. That mountain. That's what
275.
I don't know for sure. Maybe it would be too hazy. Maybe
the height of England. You gotta look at it. That is gonna reduce to imperceivable by the human eye, and then atmospheric density.
Well, he's saying with a telescope.
Then the other problem is with a telescope, you have to go through all that atmosphere. I don't believe that we can see reflected light on the clearest of clear days. I don't believe that we can see reflected light anywhere near 200 miles away. Like when you see Canada Peak, you don't see Canada Peak because you're seeing the sun being obfuscated.
Oh, yeah.
But silhouetted
that's a good point.
It,
that's a good point.
Because the sun's throw is farther than reflected light flow. So for those two reasons,
fair point.
Reflected light can't travel that far, and the angular resolution of England. Either way.
I believe that.
So there,
that.
I'll even put that into basket number 3. There's still nothing in basket number 1. Hey, we do have to wrap this up. Jay, you have to wrap this up because I can only
we'll wrap it up on
so much of this.
We'll wrap it up on Scott admitting that Bill Nye saying, well, if the Earth was flat, we could see London from New York. And he just admitted that was wrong. So we'll wrap it up on that. How's that?
Okay. Fair enough.
But seriously, Scott, we really appreciate you coming into the Lion's Den with us.
Sure, no problem.
Scott, you're a really nice guy. Appreciate it. But it's thinking like yours that's what's wrong with the world. No
I'm just saying. I know, Dave. Like I always laugh when I watch the show because Dave, you definitely are more over open-mindedness at this point. You've definitely gotten your choice than Jay is a little bit. I would say. I don't mean that rudely, but I'm just saying, just open it up just a little bit more. Just come back a little bit to the open mind, just a tiny bit. Dave, we could just help us out a little.
Listen, we all had the ability to drop the ball and change our mind based on new information. We're happy to go back to the ball, and we're actually desperately looking for some proof for the ball, more than ballers are. But I haven't found anything yet. Anything.
Without a doubt, it would be an easier side to take.
All right.
Thanks,
Scott,
guys.
Thanks, man.
So here's the thing about that guy is that he's not a plant. He's not put there by NASA to give us false information. I mean, to me, he believes every word of it.
It seems that way. As I said on the show, that's what's wrong with the world, that kind of thinking.
First of all, I want to say what I said to him, and I respect the heck out of him for coming on the show because he's very informed with the flat earth world, obviously, right? And he came on here with 3 of us against him. And so hats off to him for that. And I'm like you, Jaron, I don't think for one second that he's a plant or being paid to lie or anything like that. I truly believe, especially after talking to him, that he believes this stuff 100%. The question is would there ever be anything that would convince him to not believe?
No, but I think that also, if you look at the fact of him going to NASA every day after school, and then he talks to his friends, these are all plants in a way.
Oh, yes, yes.
When you have these people that you can kind of deploy to go out there and say, well, my dad's an astronaut, my dad's gone up there, my dad's done this, that's just an extra voice. And it's more powerful if that person believes it than if that person is lying.
Well, I totally agree, Jaron. In fact, when we found out Scott was going to come on the show, Dave and I were talking about it, and he was saying, something about mind control or whatever. And I said, well, with someone like that in that type of situation, growing up as with their father going to space, et cetera, spending the afternoons at NASA's office, you don't need any MK Ultra. That is your MK. That's stronger, if you ask me.
I don't think if we took him to the edge of the flat Earth and pushed him off, that would prove it to him.
Well, yeah. No, actually, I'll say this. If you could do that, I think Scott did to me sound like a reasonable enough guy. At least he said so anyway. At face value, he said if there was some sort of hard evidence, he was okay with going with that. He wouldn't mind believing in a flat Earth.
It's just, to me, it's crazy that what a brilliant way to get people to speak your lie by putting it in textbooks, by teaching it and telling those people that by graduating they become, professors and that they get their doctorate and they get their PhD. And so all around the world, you've got all these people that have never been somewhere. They've never been to space, but they'll all go around preaching it simply because they read it in a book or because they know somebody who knows somebody, or in this case, their dad. But it just seems so easy to me to actually fool the world with such a case because you're the only one that goes to space. There's nobody else that can go up there and verify your claims.
When I was in college, Cosmos with Carl Sagan was airing, and I was taking astronomy, and we had this big, thick astronomy textbook with all this stuff, and the teacher's jumping around. Today we're going to do chapter 21, and then the next class was chapter 7, and I realized he was following the Cosmos series. He was doing the stuff that they were talking, and I actually called him out on it. And he's like, "Well, yeah." He goes, "That's some new information, and it's easy to follow." And I just realized that I was a big fan of Carl Sagan, and I realized that he was just put there to hide the flat Earth. That's it.
Who, Sagan or the teacher?
Sagan. No, Sagan. The teacher was just doing his job. Following, it's in the book, it's on television, it's real, and just indoctrination, it just further indoctrinates, and then the ones that are indoctrinated the most become the new indoctrinators.
Yeah. I know, to finish saying what I was saying, I think Scott sounded to me anyway like the person who, if you did take him to the edge and push him off, Dave, he would admit that the Earth is flat. However, I would, after talking to him, I'll say this, I think it's practically going to take that.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is, don't you think those astronauts were all told, this is the reason that we're going to do this, is because otherwise we'll become stagnant and people will just sit around and do nothing. But if you guys go out there and you guys make it look like we're in space, that it will inspire people to do more, to learn more, to invent more, because of all the things that they can discover, even though we're stuck here. We need to give people the idea that we can expand, or else they'll become stagnant. I think it's so easy to get people on that team. When you're a military guy, you find the ones that are not religious, you find the ones that are into science, and you just convince them that the best thing for the youth, the best thing for our future, the best thing for America is to convince people that we can go to space. And there's all these, and they probably tell them that we eventually will. Like, we eventually can. We're just, right now, we're really struggling with it.
Right.
And if you guys get out there and pretend that you are, it's going to be better for the world. Otherwise, people will become stagnant and go back to the church. And do you really want that? I think it's that easy to convince these guys that it's the best move.
So they don't necessarily know that the Earth is flat. They're just like the rest of us that are told, let's convince people of this for the betterment of mankind.
I think that that's the case.
Yeah.
Bart. They don't need to know that level of the secret. They know that space is fake, or not space is fake. They need to know that they're going to act out space, faking it. But they don't think that, like, they believe in the planets. They believe that they're size that they tell us they are. They believe all that much, I guarantee it.
I wanted to ask Scott what he thought about when we send balloons up on a starry night, how all the stars disappear as it gets up into the night sky. Does anyone have an explanation for that? Anybody? Flat or round?
Well, when I watched Dwayne Kellum's balloon launch, this most recent one, when I see the size of the moon,
It's tiny.
it's tiny. I mean, I tend to think that the whole atmosphere works as a gigantic lens, and that the stars, whatever they are, the only reason we can see them is because of the atmosphere.
I just bought a giant AE map for a board and 20 half glass domes. I'm doing an experiment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wait, 20?
A pack of 20 small ones, but they're half domes, and they're people's personal domes, and I'm going to swing a spotlight around so it's circling, and then I'm going to film it in slow motion.
They're pads.
To see how each person sees the sun. I believe that the sun that I see is rising maybe 60 miles at the farthest to my east and setting maybe 60 miles farthest to my west before it gets eclipsed by atmosphere or land features. The sun that I see is only moving, if I have a 12-hour day, 130 miles divided by 12, that's how many miles per hour that the sun is moving, the way I see it.
In your vision dome.
Pad.
And getting to the moon, we see this giant moon, but you send a balloon up and the moon becomes a little dot and the sun still big. The sun's still big. And why does the moon shrink and not the sun?
Right. I don't know.
When you're looking at the sun from a balloon at 120,000 feet, and then you look down at the earth, there's no way that the people down there see the sun that high in the sky. There's no way.
No.
There's absolutely no way. They're seeing it manifest much lower. Remember the experiment I did with the sun reflecting off the hotel in Vegas, where the heat from that reflection was just as hot as the sun. The sun's over to my right at 3 o'clock, and it's bouncing off of the mirrored hotel on my left, and both of them felt the same. So there's a lot going on with reflections. I don't know what to call it anymore.
One of the things I wish that Dwayne would have done, and I'm hoping that I know Jay wants to get together and do a three-way launch or so. I asked Dwayne if he would join us the other day. One of the things I wish he would have done is if we put some sticks or something on that gondola that he sent up to see if there was any shadows that ever were cast up on the top of the gondola. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, to see. Yeah.
The sun's really below you.
Right. Yeah, that's a good call for the next launch. Yeah, never would have thought of that, Jaron. It's a good one.
You have to have some sort of level on it, though, because people could claim that it's swinging side to side, so you can see if it's level.
Yeah, true. Well, that's what somebody had mentioned. They said to put, how they always have these little dolls or little characters that stick out in front of the camera. Well, a good thing to do would be to stick out an arm, and then on that arm have a mirror, and then on the bottom of that mirror have a level, so that you're actually seeing out behind you and whether or not you're level.
Yes.
It's like an extra camera for free.
An extra camera in the back. Yep. Yeah, that'd be great. Jaron, you want to stick around for a couple minutes so we can knock out a couple speak pipes?
Sure. I'm always here anyway. So.
Hey, what's going on, people? Flat Earth Man in the house. I want to talk to you about the Flat Earth International Conference. But before I do, let me tell you that all you're watching is a puppet show. Yeah, the whole world's a stage. Astronauts, they're just actors, of course, and yeah, they all get paid. Look at me, Ma, I'm floating in space. No, you're not. You're lying to the whole human race. All you're watching is a puppet show, yeah. Hey, what's going on, people? Flat Earth Man in the house.
Hey, what's going on, people? Conspiracy Music Guru right here with DITRH on the Flat Earth Podcast and preparing for the Flat Earth International Conference on the 15th and 16th of November in Denver, Colorado. Very much looking forward to it. Got a couple of songs to showcase. I'm going to be playing live as well, flying all the way from Spain, and I cannot wait. It is going to be the most amazing thing you've ever been to. If you want to understand a little bit more about this reality, if you're flat curious, or if you are well-versed in the flat earth conspiracy, then we can't wait to see you. It's going to be one hell of a conference.
If you're a full-on flat earther or just discovering flat earth and not sure, don't miss this conference. There'll be 1,000 people that think alike, that you can talk to. You'll learn amazing new things about Flat Earth. If you're new, you'll meet amazing people. You'll make lifelong friends. I wouldn't miss it for the world. If somebody said to me, hey, we'll give you an all-expense-paid trip to the Caribbean, which is my favorite place to go, or you can pay your own way to the Flat Earth Conference, I would give up the Caribbean and go to this conference. You can find it at fe2018.com or just go to theflatearthpodcast.com, and there's a link right there on the top of the page.
All right, let's do this. We got one from Shaggy Sasquatch. Got to say I love the name.
Hey guys, can you recommend a book for someone who is new to the flat earth? Like an introduction book. Some of the things that you will talk about on the show are hard to visualize, and I would like to have a book where I can read and maybe have some diagrams and pictures in it to help me better understand it. Thanks.
All right, great question, Shaggy Sasquatch. Guys, what's your first reaction on a book?
I have the Mark Sargent one, and that's because I told him I'd buy it, and I did. But yeah, how's that for a plug?
Be honest, Jaron. Be honest.
No, I mean, I actually thought it was really good. I thought, for a beginner book, it's something I could give my mom or somebody like that, and they could get through it. But I mean, really, if you're talking about, I don't know, the best one I've seen, maybe Edward Hendry's book.
Mm-hmm.
Edward Hendry's is a great book. It's a lot thicker than most people are willing to read. With today's Twitter mentality, people don't want to read a big, thick book like that. But he has tons of information, some graphics in there. I think that there's just some great documentaries like ODD's A Stranger's Guide to Flat Earth. Because this is such a visual thing, I think that videos are sometimes better than books, and for those
than books,
because there's so much you have to see, and there's so many people out there. Oh, you think researching is watching YouTube videos? And I always say, try to find anything that's not on YouTube. It's all there. It's just like life. Everything is there.
Well, it's just like any other communication medium. YouTube is the new books.
You need discernment,
right? When books became the thing, 20 years into it, you couldn't find a single subject that wasn't in a book.
You can take 50 pages of a book to describe a thing, but you can take 2 minutes of a video to show it 100 times better.
Sure.
And I think people have to recognize that if you went to school, especially in this country, that that there was things that were taught to you because they were meant to instill American pride. When you talk about the Thanksgiving, or you talk about how the Indians were handled, or Columbus, and all these things should tell you that there's definitely a chance, it's a fact, that your textbooks were not completely honest. So you have to be able to watch something and look for and really build your own.
Sure.
Yeah, you can't just accept what somebody hands you in a book, because what better way would there be to indoctrinate a country than to require people to go to school, make it free, and then hand out books where you indoctrinated them all with the same information? That's the way you would indoctrinate a country. That's the way that you would get all the people to believe the same thing, make them think they're smart, but they're not actually learning the truth. It's like right in front of us. That's how you would do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of the textbooks come from one company, I believe, that sells them cheaper than anybody that tries to write their own textbook. So the school systems, which are starving for money by design, will always get the cheaper Rockefeller-funded textbooks.
Sure. And one last recommendation, Shaggy, when it comes to the visual things, I think I mentioned this, or we mentioned this last week on the podcast. Check out the YouTube channel, My Perspective. Rory does those, and I find his stuff, what he does with that software, to be the best when it comes to understanding the visual aspects of some of these flat earth topics.
A quick and easy read is, you got to read Parallax. I mean, you got to read, Zetetic Astronomy by Samuel Rowbotham. You have to start there.
Yeah.
You have to start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when looking for Rory Cooper, for those of you that never have watched his videos, you have to search My Perspective Flat Earth, because it doesn't show up unless you put Flat Earth after it. The name of the channel is just My Perspective, but you have to put Flat Earth after it.
Wow. Go figure. Reminds me a little bit of the fact that Alexa no longer plays the Flat Earth podcast.
Wow, I know.
It plays some other nonsense show, and it says it's the Flat Earth podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be from iHeartRadio, or what should she say at that point? I forgot what she actually said when it did play.
I think it said looking up the latest episode of the Flat Earth podcast from iHeartRadio.
Okay, she still says the exact same words, but then it just plays some joke of a podcast.
Yep.
It plays some joke of a podcast. Now, do you think that is in response to the videos that we put out showing what Alexa does? Why would it change?
I think because that's a good way to keep people from listening to it.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Same thing with My Perspectives channel. I mean, I find it really curious that you can type in My Perspective and the channel doesn't come up unless you put in Flat Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It used to. All right, let's take another one from Shane.
Hey guys, Shane, North Carolina. Hey, I heard your latest podcast with Matt Long. Y'all spoke about the Yanny Laurel thing. I don't know if anybody's thought about it, but as soon as I heard it, it was a computer-generated sound. It was set in a rhythmic pattern. I remember hearing it on Good Morning America that morning, and later that evening with the Houston Rockets playing basketball. Shaq and, the NBA cast talked about it during the game and even played it again in a rhythmic fashion there. 2 days later, you had a school shooting in Houston. Think about it. As soon as I heard it, I mentioned it. I said, I wonder what's going to happen now, because it's almost like it was activating somebody. Somebody was already pre-planned to hear a keyword and to respond to that keyword like hypnosis. Just my thoughts. I don't take anything for granted anymore. So hope you have a great day. Appreciate the podcast. Thanks.
Oh, wow. It's a good take there, Shane. I hadn't even thought about that. Was the Laurel Yanny thing something to trigger someone?
I don't think they would need to do it in that way, but done easier. But you never know. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, once you hear that and you see those things are eye openers to me. I mean, when I saw what David texted me and I said, Missa, come here, listen to this. And I was thinking in my head, if she says Yanni, I'm going to flip out because there's no way somebody can hear this different. And I said, listen, what do you hear? She said, Yanni. Like,
oh,
hell.
Missa.
I was so livid. I was like, you're lying. Somebody, I thought David actually texted her to say that. I thought it was like,
Laurel.
That's his
Laurel.
Exact same thing happened to me. Not with Missa,
Laurel.
but with the first person that I
Laurel.
played it for. There it is.
so awful.
Clearly Laurel.
Laurel.
Now,
Laurel.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing that happened with Missa is that the next day, I was just playing it on the computer randomly. She's like, wait a second, I just heard Laurel. I'm like, what? You heard Laurel? She goes, play it again. She goes, yeah, now I hear Laurel. But then 10 minutes later, she was back to Yanni.
That's insane. That happened with people with the dress. They would kind of go back and forth. I never was able to go back and forth with that one.
Never.
But
Close.
a lot of people claimed the second time I looked at it, it was black and blue. Like weird.
What did you see?
Oh, I saw white and gold, and that's all I've ever seen with that dress.
Wow. I've seen black and blue.
Gosh, man, that's so nuts. And I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but the people who hear Yanni, when they hear Yanni, they hear it in a different voice as well.
Yeah, they hear it like a little squeaky, like computer voice.
Yeah, squeaky computer, high-pitched voice, which is insane to me because I clearly hear the deep voice Laurel.
Of a man, yeah.
Yeah, so weird. So weird. There's something to it. Have no idea, Shane, if it's a trigger or not, but I will agree with Shane and say that I don't take anything for granted these days either.
Somebody made a New Yorker style one picture meme of a guy meeting a girl. They're shaking hands and she says, "Hi, I'm Laurel." And he goes, "Nice to meet you, Yanni."
Oh, wow. Wow. Like, why? Right? All right. This one's from Wayne.
Hey guys, Gravity Man here from Twitter. I just saying hi. I like your website. I'm looking through YouTube here. I got a new subscriber to Flat Earth Brothers. I was looking at their video. If I told you the video is called NASA's Funny Firmament Cover Story. It says, if I told you there was a man-made barrier surrounding Earth, would you think I was crazy? A man-made barrier around Earth. So NASA claims there's a man-made barrier around Earth. Okay, so it's really all I wanted to call about. Are these people insane? That's my question. I guess I have to have a question. Are these people insane? That's my question. Are they insane? I'm getting pissed off now. It's not even research anymore. I'm just mad. Have a nice day.
All right. I have not heard this.
I can't tell which side he's on.
All I heard was he likes our website.
No, he's no, he's on the flat Earth side, but he's talking about a video that he stumbled upon where someone from NASA says that there's a man-made barrier in space, and I haven't come across that. Have you guys?
Yeah, They talk about it. It was probably a year old or something, where NASA said that there is and I've actually heard this before. I mean, have you heard about the thing that they did when they put up some satellite that I don't know, ejected a bunch of like shrapnel, and it actually went into orbit around? Have you heard all that kind of stuff back in the JFK days?
No.
No, I haven't heard that at all. I've heard the fact that the Colorado was at Boulder University, I believe, that said that there's an invisible barrier in space. I've heard that, where they fired the electrons at it, and they claim there's a hard, fast, impenetrable barrier up there,
Man,
which I thought was crazy. But I didn't hear the man-made part.
I'll find out exactly what it was. And then there's also, they did something else and I don't know if that's, I'm not saying that you can go to space. I don't think you can. But I know that when you really dig deep, you can find some stuff that they did in the 60s that is outrageous. That is, again, it could all be part of the lie, because they say they sent something up and then it exploded and put all this stuff up there that then they couldn't go up for a while. I don't know. It's definitely nonsense. They've been doing this forever, and now they say that there's a man-made barrier up there, that they put it up there. That's what they say. I'll tell you exactly what it says. I'll find it for you. Yeah, it says NASA's Van Allen probe spot man-made barrier shrouding Earth. Humans have long been shaping Earth's landscape, but now scientists know we can shape our near-space environment as well. A certain type of communications, very low frequency or VLF radio communications, have been found to interact with particles in space, affecting how and where they move. At times, these interactions can create a barrier around Earth against natural high-energy particle radiation in space. These results, part of a comprehensive paper on human-induced space weather, were recently published. I mean, he's just saying that they say that they created a barrier that can't be penetrated or something. Oh, here it is. The probes have noticed an interesting coincidence. The outward extent of the VLF bubble corresponds almost exactly to the inner edge of the Van Allen radiation belts, a layer of charged particles held in place by the Earth's magnetic fields. Dan Baker, director of the University of Colorado Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics in Boulder, coined this lower limit the impenetrable barrier, and speculates that if there were no human VLF transmissions, the boundary would likely stretch closer to Earth. Indeed, comparisons of the modern extent of the radiation belts from the Van Allen data show the inner boundary to be much farther away than its recorded position in satellite data from the 1960s, when VLF transmissions were more limited. So it just says plans are already underway to test the VLF transmissions in the upper atmosphere to see if they could remove excess charged particles, which can appear during periods of intense space weather, such as when the sun erupts with giant clouds of particles and energy. Yeah, he calls it an impenetrable barrier, and I think people are taking that to mean like a dome or something.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's as simple. I don't know about you guys. Isn't it as simple as you can't steer in space, so there's nowhere to go? I mean, it's just that you run out of atmosphere. There's no directional control. There's no steering. There's no, you're just going to fall back to Earth. You can't go fast enough. You can't get away.
And the guys running around the space station, where's all that inertia go? Why doesn't it start tumbling?
Absolutely.
Is the space station gravitationally locked to the spinning Earth like the moon?
It wouldn't make any sense.
They have more gravity, more mass on the bottom of the space station. Great planning.
They would get fried.
Right. All right. Let's take another one here from Mr. Lowe.
Hi, guys. I have an idea I came up with, and I wanted to share it with you before I forgot. I went to a free planetarium exhibit last night, reluctantly, with my 3-year-old. But nonetheless, they pointed out that Venus is one of the brightest objects in the sky. Every official map or diagram of the planetary orbits that I have seen has all of these planets going in a perfect circle, like a ringed path, like around the sun, instead of like each having their own path and going all which directions like satellites. Can we compare that to what we visibly see in the sky and maybe debunk the paths of planets, or specifically Venus?
Okay, that from Mr. Lowe. Did you guys follow that? I was trying to really hard.
He's saying, I think that the observations of the planet orbits are probably pretty correct. I mean, as far as the observations, I think he was saying, can we debunk their orbits? Isn't that what he's kind of saying?
I think he's saying that they chose perfect circles versus ellipses that they should be.
Well, the reason for that is because they like to tell people that we're moving the same speed at all the time. You have to dig a little bit deeper to find out that no, it's actually an elliptical orbit, and that we would be moving at a faster speed at sometimes and slower at the other, which is a problem because what do they tell you when you say, oh, well, how don't we feel that we're moving? Oh, it's because you're moving at a constant speed, but you're not.
Right. We speed up coming around the sun and then whip ourselves back out. I used to play with magnets. I had a magnet game where I had, hundreds of these magnets, and we would put a bunch on a board spaced out, and then everybody would take turns putting another magnet on the board. And you keep doing it, and no magnets are allowed to touch. After a little while, it just becomes impossible. If you think about the heliocentric model with all of these planets and moons spinning and whirling, and wouldn't Jupiter tug on Earth or tug on Mars over some period of time, or one of their moons? There's no way that it would keep perfect order like it does if we were in this random spinning, gravity pulling, nonsensical system.
Well, no, it was all set up mathematically perfect.
It's not mathematically perfect. They can't model a three-body model. It doesn't work. When you add more than two objects, it doesn't work.
I'm just going to ignore that statement like they do.
That's what they do. All right. Any more speak pipes? Sorry, we didn't answer that thoroughly, but that's the best we got. But wait, hold on. I was responding to some troll comments on the Facebook page, and proof that we've been to space. Somebody showed me the picture of a bottom of a frying pan with a yellow sky, and said that's from Venus. And there was a little piece of metal showing that it was the rover on Venus, and that was proof. And I was almost able to reproduce it without getting off the couch with just like a pillow and a piece of fabric. And
wow,
what people believe as proof is beyond understanding at this point.
All right, this one is from Martin all the way in Poland.
Hi guys, it's Martin from Poland. First, big thanks for this podcast. You're doing an amazing job, guys. Keep up the good work. And when it comes to flat Earth and all these questions we have, I got one to the all ball earthers. Why we can see a light rings on the clouds during the full moon? When it's a full moon and when it's a little bit cloudy, how come that we can see the rings of the light if the moon is so far away? I think that's a good question. All right, thank you guys, and well, keep up the good work. Bye.
All right, thank you, Martin. We are so international, it's not even funny. The question, I've asked this question before as well. So when you look up in the sky on a full moon night and there's clouds in the sky, why is it that a certain area of clouds between you and the moon will light up? And it was a question I had early on in my flat Earth research. Shouldn't it be evenly lighting up all of the clouds, not just like the portion that's closest to the moon in your vision? But then I kind of like started second guessing myself on that because of things like the guy standing on the beach and sees the ray of sun, right? That reflection. Is that light actually there, or is it just unique to the observer? What do you guys think about the light around the clouds when it comes to the moon?
My excuse was because you're looking at the light of the moon, the cloud is just in the way, and therefore it's lighting up. But what I've noticed is it lights up an area all the way around, not exactly in line from my eyes' point of view with the moon. And it's easily replicatable with street light over trees. And there's a meme going around. I made one where it looks exactly the same. The moon that we see, in my opinion, is right above the clouds.
Jaron, what's your take on this?
Everything's seen through a lens of the atmosphere. And so when you see the light of the moon and it's hitting the lens and then it's hitting clouds, you see a kind of a magnified or kind of like a shine or a sheen. Is that what you call it? A sheen? S-H-E-E-N?
Sheen? Yeah, maybe.
Is that a word? It's like a glare. It's like a glare off the clouds of the moon. It's close. It's within, a few hundred miles. My opinion.
Mm-hmm. Got you.
How about you?
Like, I still go back to it and I say the same thing. I'm like, if it's really 250,000 miles away, shouldn't it be lighting up all of the clouds equally because it's so far? Not just one little patch of clouds, you know what I mean? Like as if the moon is right above them. But in fact, visually, that is what we see. So,
well, what I've been noticing lately, and I don't know if you see this too, have you ever seen where, you've got the, say it's a half moon or so out during the day and its lit part is pointed totally different than where the sun is?
Yes, I've got pictures and video beyond belief of that. So many of them. I see that all the time, Jaron.
And what I think it is that, I'm a believer that the sky is flat. And if you kind of picture bending the sky upwards so that you kind of reposition the flatness where it would be, that light is always pointed in that direction. To me, it's just more proof that the sun is not below you. The sun is not going down towards the horizon, or else it would be lighting the underneath of the moon. And it's not. It always has the moon pointing up towards the sky and the sun's kind of setting. And maybe that's just from where I live, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've got some video from that I took, and I remember the dates. Actually, it was in August of 2016, where, picture this, if you will, Jaron. Okay, so the sun, it's like, say, 10 in the morning.
Okay.
The sun is at about a 40 degree angle straight behind my back. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
The day moon is out, and it is about 45 to 50 degrees up, so higher than the sun, and it is directly in front of me, 180 degrees different than the sun. And only the top half of the moon is lit. I can't for the life of me draw a diagram using the heliocentric model to figure out how in the heck the sunlight, which is, again, at a lower angle, even though it's further away, but it's 180 degrees away from the moon, and it's at a lower angle, lower elevation, I should say. How is it not touching the bottom of the moon at all?
Right. And if you kind of picture unfolding the ceiling of space back up where it would be if it was a roof, if it was a ceiling, well, then it makes sense. Then it makes sense why the sun is up.
Only if you unfold it and the sun is much higher than the moon, because remember, at the angle, even if you raised up the sun, it would still be looking right at the moon if they're close to the same elevation, correct?
True, yeah.
So why would the bottom half of the moon not have any light on it?
A glober would say that the sun looks lower just because of perspective.
They wouldn't say that.
They wouldn't? Wow.
Yeah.
I went even farther than they would.
It's hilarious. I'll have to reactivate the video. I took a video of it and some camera shots or whatever, and I put it up on my channel like 2 years ago. This was early in my flat earth research stuff. I'll have to reactivate that later today, because the one thing I asked was not give me a mathematical formula, not point me to time and date. Someone draw me a diagram, show me how the bottom half of the moon is not lit up. And I could not find one person. There was tons of trolls that hit the video, of course, but not one person could ever give me a diagram of how that could be possible.
Has anyone been able to give a diagram how the eclipse comes in from the top of the moon when there's a Saturnian eclipse?
No, I can't.
Yeah, so many globers will argue, if the Earth is flat, explain the eclipse. And I just turn it back to them, explain how your eclipse happens, because we proved it's not the Earth because of a Saturnian eclipse where the sun and moon are both above the observer's horizon. That's impossible for the Earth to cause a shadow, but they just ignore that and say Earth isn't flat because you can't explain the eclipse.
Yeah. Are you trying to get my blood pressure up by bringing up eclipses?
Sorry. Didn't mean to trigger you. Any more speak pipes? Jay, speak pipe. Come on. Speak pipe.
The 30-minute conversation with the NASA astronaut's son didn't trigger me, but you say eclipse once and I'm about to explode. All right, let's see. This one is from Adam. We got two more left. Adam?
Hey guys, Adam from the UK here. Just want to say I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the flat Earth stuff. I'm more of an enclosed model, not sure about the shape, but the biggest tell that we've got that we don't live on a heliocentric model is the star trails. I think they are the best bet that we've got to make people aware. I mean, Polaris never moves, precession, they say, doesn't really happen. There's no real evidence for it. And if we are on a ball spinning through millions of miles through space, that is a vacuum and vast and open, the star trails should really move around, and they shouldn't be fixed like they are. We wouldn't have constellations or concepts like that. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate what you're doing. Big love. Take care.
All right. Thank you. From the UK. What do y'all think, guys? Star trails.
I got a question for Jaron about star trails. Has anybody filmed more than a half circle star trails in the south?
I can't say that for sure. I mean, I'm sure that there's video that says it is that, but not anybody that I would trust. But I mean, for sure, I think that they do that in the north, but in the south, I'm not.
And in the south, it's difficult to get into on this podcast. But even if they are circling around, from your point of view, you're going to see a frown face. It's going to come up as it gets closer to you, and it's going to go down, even though it's really circling away. It's going to go up, and you're going to get at best a half a dome.
Mm-hmm.
half of a circle, a dome. And then he also said that he's a enclosed world person from his point of view. I'm leaning in that direction too, but we don't know. There's just a lot of evidence in my mind that says there is something holding this all in. Can we get through it? Is there more on the outside? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's just, I think, the more I look at this, it's just when you've given people an incorrect model as far as the globe, and then you've sent them out there with their telescopes and everything that they're doing is just confirming the incorrect model. So there's they're never going to discover it. I was thinking about parallax the other day, or looking into that, whether or not there's such thing as stellar parallax that, of course, we can't measure. Only people with huge telescopes or Hubble can measure. But if you really think about what they say parallax is, it is required in their model. And of course, if you're talking about the Earth and then 6 months later, the Earth on the other side of the sun orbit, by design, you're on the other side of the Earth. So there would be parallax just in their whole model.
Correct.
There has to be, because you're on one side of the Earth, then you're on the other. So you just moved 8,000 miles. So of course there would be parallax. So what I'm saying is, even if there was parallax in the sky, meaning that the stars are moving, they're adjusting their distance. Let's say there is. Well, then why would you jump to the conclusion that means that we are moving? Well, it's because it's required in their model. It could never be that we are standing still and those stars are moving, because that doesn't work in their model. So people need to look at it and realize that it's not like they're discovering that we're moving. It's that their model says that we're moving, and therefore the parallax is a result of that move. They never look at things the other window, though.
Yeah. Confirmation bias at its finest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's beyond that. I mean, it's just everything that they say has to be right? I mean, that's where I say they've gotten away with the biggest heist of all time, is because you can never prove NASA wrong until you can go to space. You need to go to Saturn and measure it. You need to go to the moon and measure it. And as long as they keep you from doing that, then they can lie about it all they want.
They've also brainwashed people into not being able to think clearly. I've got a whole bunch of comments recently saying the fact that we see different constellations in the northern and southern hemisphere proves that we live on a ball. No two ways about it, period. End of story.
I've seen that too.
Flat Earth debunked. And I just use your example of a giant room the size of a city with recessed lights in it and two people on the opposite ends looking up at the lights.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It makes perfect sense, and it works perfectly on a flat Earth. But I'll give it to you. That goes into basket number 3.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that happened to me in this whole thing, and it happened right from the very beginning, was me yelling at my wife when she said, could the Earth be flat? And because I yelled at her and said, no, don't be ridiculous. That's stupid. Planes go around it. And I kind of really shamed her for even mentioning that. And then to see the azimuthal equidistant map, I still remember the feeling that came over me, like, oh my goodness, I just yelled at my wife, 2 weeks ago, because I really felt that there was no possible way the Earth could be flat. And then I see this map and I'm like, well, planes can still go around it. And that was like a revelation to me that you can never just jump and say something can't be something, that you have to take the time to do it. And I think that because that was the very first thing that I'd ever heard about flat Earth, it just allows me now to look at things more than once and from different angles and really think, is this something I could be being lied to? When you just say something as ridiculous as, I hear it all the time. People saying, the upside down moon in the southern hemisphere proves we're on a ball. I heard that from the beginning, but it's just, again, like Dave said, you could just go in your bedroom and put a circle on the ceiling and draw an A on the top and a B on the bottom and walk from one side to the other, and the moon flips. And, so for people, I think they need to see those. They need to see those over and over again, because maybe it hits them like, oh my goodness, I've been out there saying that, this isn't possible. I think the problem is, once you've taken that stance against flat Earth, it's hard to go back on it.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
So many people come up with the exact same proof, the exact same thing. When was that indoctrinated into us? Because it was done consistently with the entire population, because everyone is saying the same thing.
Right.
That just shows the limit, how they've been gatekept on their ability to think.
But that's what we're doing well, is, eliminate each one of those. Keep putting out videos showing, nobody's coming out with videos showing boats go over the curve, and because there's none. So the more videos we put out showing why that happens and what it actually is. And then I had a person email me the other day and say, hey, did you see this video, what they do in Ecuador at the equator with the water? It goes down the opposite way in the opposite hemisphere. So people are still at that level where they don't realize that that's just a hoax that's being played on them by people at the equator, who have just said, let's pour the water in one direction and then go to the other side of the equator and pour it in the other direction. And people will pay us money because they think it. So all these things should be signs to people that, why were we taught that? Why would you teach something like flat Earth is so ridiculous? If it was so ridiculous, then you would teach people, here's why it's not flat in school. You wouldn't just gloss over it. Just, oh no, water falls off the edge, and you just move on.
Well, yeah.
That's not the way you would teach people. And you would have, it's ridiculous. You would have a monument somewhere in Utah that shows the Earth curve, so you could take children there, and you would take field trips there, and easily show it. And they don't have those things. People need to ask the question, why? Why were we taught these things in just a gloss over manner when we were 6 years old?
Exactly. And whether you're a globe side or a flat side, whether you're like Scott that we interviewed or us, you have to admit that by studying flat versus globe, you became way smarter in the world of science. And so if you really want to teach kids, and make them smarter in science, why aren't they teaching the flat versus globe debate?
I don't think there's anybody who's in this at all that could say that the flat Earth question or quandary hasn't caused them to do more experiments, to look at the world more. So, I mean, that alone tells you that how stupid is science to, say, oh, well, people aren't engaged, but yet just some guys coming on the screen and saying, hey, the Earth might be flat, that engaged everybody?
That's right.
I have a question. Since you've discovered flat Earth, have you been bored for a single minute?
Never.
No, because as soon as I'm bored, I go straight to flat Earth research.
Right. I remember there was times where I was like, oh man, there's nothing to do. Turn on the television.
What am I going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Me too. I'm so far behind.
Yeah.
So many things I want to do. You want to do something, you're like,
doesn't happen.
So many people are complaining, Jaron was supposed to talk to me and he's not responding. I'm like, if Jaron responded to half of the people that called him, he wouldn't have a single moment in the day.
And my problem is that I'm too nice and so on. And somebody Skypes me and says, hey, can we have a conversation? I'm always like, yeah, let me know when. And I need to do the BOB thing. I asked BOB a long time ago, how do you deal with people that email you and says, just don't answer them. Don't answer anybody. Like, what?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. No, it is unfortunate. I get so many people messaging me, and I try to respond, and my response is, if it's more than 3 words, I'll never have time.
Yeah.
So if I don't respond to you, don't take it personally. I maybe didn't even see your message because I just don't spend all day looking at messages.
All right. And before we take the final speed, I'll say 2 things about Jaron's initiation in the flat Earth thing. A, you're not supposed to raise your voice to your wife. B, if you do, it better be over the Yanny thing.
No, I thought it was over. How do planes go around a flat Earth? Come on. We both float around the world. How do planes go around it?
Laurel.
Right.
Laurel.
There it is.
Laurel.
All right. This last one is from Brian Bender.
Hey guys, it's Brian from Southern California here. Love your show, love the podcast. I'm definitely not new to Flat Earth. I've been researching this for about a year. I actually had my own podcast for a little while, and the height of that podcasting career, I actually got a chance to interview Dave Murphy about the Flat Earth, which was awesome. But unfortunately, I'm just very busy. I'm a full-time electrician, and I used to do low voltage, so through the state of California, I'm actually a certified fiber optics technician. And I'd love to chat with you guys sometime. Maybe hop on the podcast if that's possible. Talking about fiber optics and how that essentially disproves the existence of satellite through the knowledge that I have in some of my curriculum that they teach in school for fiber optics, because that's essentially how the whole world communicates. So I'd love that. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Great call there from Brian. Yeah, we'll have to contact you. We've got your email address here.
Just have them call Jaron, and Jaron, you can set it up.
Jaron will get right back with you, Brian.
Yeah. A couple days. We'll save your email address, and maybe we can have a conversation with you.
Yeah, we've got it saved here because it makes a good point. The fiber optic world, we've mentioned before how it's openly admitted that undersea cables, fiber optics, that sort of thing, accounts for 95% or 98% of all internet activity. The 2 or 3% that it doesn't account for, they say, is in Antarctica, where we can't go, obviously. So yeah, fiber optics is definitely a satellite killer. Anyone else agree?
I totally agree.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, I just looking into GPS the other day, and when you just read about how GPS works, and you'll realize that there's so many errors in GPS, even that they say that there is, that it's not even what's used most of the time. Even according to their stuff. I'm not saying according to reality, which in reality, they're using the ground-based stuff all the time and maybe some balloons. The way they describe it, they've been trying to kind of get away from it. It's GPS, and then there's the PPS, the precise positioning system. There's just more speed in ground-based transmissions, obviously with fiber optic cables. There's no reason it's cheaper to do fiber optic cables and ground based. There's just no reason for satellites unless you're trying to indoctrinate people into thinking that it's possible.
Another thing that shows that satellites aren't real is Sirius satellite radio. Every time I go down to the Caribbean or off the coast of the United States, they say that the satellite radio, the satellite television is going to cut out due to licensing agreements. So when you're 200 miles off the shore, it cuts out because of licensing.
Right.
It's because we're away from any antennas that can reach the plane.
I was about to say, or it's just away from the towers that it needs to be.
Yeah.
So just to go back to what I was talking about earlier, just to bring it up, so that and I know people don't have to believe in an A bomb or an H bomb. In 1958, which we all know about, right? That James Van Allen said the Van Allen belts were up there. Well, then they went out and tried to bomb the sky, and they created a problem because they actually brought the Van Allen belts supposedly closer. That's what the word is. There was no scientific basis for it. I mean, they just went out. Like, that just sounds like idiot Americans to me. Like, let's just go bomb the sky. Why not? They did that.
Mm-hmm. They could have just been shooting up any kind of bomb.
Yeah, that's
not necessarily a nuclear bomb.
No. They say the Americans launched the first atomic nuclear tests in 1958, but whether or not those are just what kind of bombs they're lighting off, they did it in 1962. I think it's called Starfish Prime. But people, there's newspaper articles in Honolulu that people said that the whole sky was lit up like all night, from the bomb burst. Now, that doesn't mean it's an atomic bomb, doesn't mean that it's a nuclear bomb. But obviously, whatever they tried doing. And I actually have a video that I thought was just released recently. I wonder if I could find it. I'll send it to you guys. It's, most of the videos you see of all that stuff is completely fabricated, in my opinion. But this one showed some parts that looked, at least the sky was lighting up. And have you ever, I don't know if you've seen it, but you've seen fireworks at night or lightning at night, how it lights up the whole sky.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sky actually becomes blue. Yeah, it was kind of the same kind of deal.
Yeah, like lightning does too. Yeah.
I believe that was Matrix Decode that got a shot of lightning at like 2:00 in the morning, and it looked like a beautiful day. Clouds, blue sky, everything.
Completely daylight.
Which supports the theory that the sun's electric energy is fluorescing the nitrogen in the sky, which gives us daylight.
Daylight. Yep. Cool. All right, guys. Well, let's. That was the last speak pipe for now. Let's wrap this up. This has been a bonus length episode with the interview and everything else. And any closing thoughts, Jaron or Dave?
I thank Scott for coming on. It was good to talk to him. I have some videos I want to send him. I don't think he. I don't know how you can get around the astronauts completely blowing the idea of how you see stars in space. To me, it seems like a complete, you've got Armstrong that says from the beginning that you can't, and then slowly some people say you can. And as an astronaut, what are you supposed to do? Either way you answer is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of obvious. And for him to say that guy, Greater Sapien, did a good job, I watched that video before, and I thought it was he made one or two good points, and the rest of it was a cherry-picking attempt at showing, oh, well, Armstrong here, he's actually talking about when he was on the moon looking, and he says he can see him through the optics, so that means he could see stars. Regardless, these guys have all said that you can't see stars from the day side of Earth when you clearly should. So I've got some footage I'll send them.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said at the top there, thank you. We do appreciate you coming on, Scott. Dave, anything else before we?
No, that's it. That was a nice long show. Thanks, Scott, for coming on. I just think you're completely blind to reality, but thanks for coming on.
I have hope that one day he'll see the light before we have to bring him to the edge and push him off, like you said.
There you go. That would do it. Maybe.
But we appreciate it. And thanks everyone else for tuning in. We'll be back in a week or so. And thanks once again for listening to the Flat Earth Podcast.
Well, they tell me I come from a pond full of scum right here on a spinning blue ball. A spot from the sky made the scum come alive. Somehow it managed to thrive. Then the scum grew fins and learned how to swim. And swam upon the shore. From one to the next, species progressed. From that day on evermore. And not far in the past, from some monkey's ashes, how we find us here. The theory stinks, found no missing links. It's clear that none will appear. We're on a spinning blue ball. That's a lie they've been telling us all. Don't believe the things they say. Use your mind, find your own way. All the powers that be. We're show you what they want you to see. Alright. I thought it was true, I learned it in school. They taught me to parrot their rules. I opened my eyes and came to surmise that what they taught was untrue. It's not just school, everywhere it's the rule. One grand Luciferian lie. Be on your guard, don't be too smart, girl, you might just get surprised. Johnny Depp is a girl, Angelina's a guy, and it makes me roll my eyes. I really don't care which gender they wear, but I never could stomach a lie. We're on a spinning blue ball. That's the lie they've been telling us all. You've been tricked, you've been spoon-fed. Tricks they put inside your head. The things that you know, they're all just a part of the show. Just lift up your eyes, take a look at the sky. Truth is right there to see. Airplanes, white lines, spraying poisons behind into the lungs of you and of me. Yeah, I wish I could look in one single book to learn all I need to be free. But when the name is Bible, then you know of what it's full. So I guess it's all up to me. They serve me up shit and expect me to sit and take it with a wink and a grin. But of all of the lies, Curie takes the prize. For deception, I give him the win. We're on a spinning blue ball. That's the lie they've been telling us all. All that we see, a false reality. It's time for our minds to be set free. Most of the sheep are very deeply asleep, and they won't hear a word of this song. But those who can see will most surely agree it's time to separate right from wrong. The photos from space are a total disgrace, and all cartoons are fakes. So why don't the Hubble take a little trouble to show us tranquility base? They got a lot of nerve, tell me water can curve and stick to the spinning blue ball. We know water's lies flat, cause that's where it's at, and the earth lies flat and still. Yeah, I come to suspect the Mandela effect can show us the way to get clear. But nothing is real, this ain't a done deal, so let go of your fear. We're on a spinning blue ball. That's the lie they've been telling us all. They've been telling us all. White is black, black is white. What is wrong and what is right? Now is the time to open up your mind.